So,
oh my God.
Yeah, that's that. And then Slammiversary is Saturday. And I watched the entire Impact show. If you guys want me to do the Impact report every week, I'd be happy to. I'm going to watch Impact and Ring of Honor every week so we can better cover those shows. We have Kenny Omega and Sami Callihan in a no DQ match for the Impact title. God bless Impact, but Sami Callihan, who's a really, really good, he's a very good promo. But he opens up the show and he did a promo, which I can still not wrap my mind around. So maybe a regular Impact viewer can explain this to me. Sami Callihan says, he goes, every time you have a match, Kenny Omega, these good brothers try to interfere. Therefore, I want a no DQ match. I was like, what?
Huh?
They interfere every time, and so your solution is a match with no DQs where they can just interfere? Hopefully he's got a crew, because otherwise, I don't know what that was all about. We got Deonna Purrazzo, who will be defending the Knockouts title against a mystery challenger, and they were teasing that it could be anybody, including, of all people, No Way Jose. So we'll see who she ends up...
What? I thought you were going to say Britt Baker. What?
No
Way Jose?
They were doing a deal where... I'll get to that in a second. Let me keep getting through the card.
Right,
it was actually funny the way they did it. We got Fire and Flava versus Rosemary and Havoc for the Knockouts tag team titles. We have Violent by Design, the Good Brothers, Rich Swann and Willie Mack, and TJP and Fallah Bahh fighting for the Impact tag team titles. We have an Ultimate X match with Josh Alexander, Trey Miguel, Rohit Raju, Petey Williams, Ace Austin, and Chris Bay.
Ooh.
Chris Sabin will face Moose, which actually... I think that's going to be a great match because I saw the stuff they did on the show. Moose is very good, and he's very big. And Chris Sabin is awesome, and he's very small. You can't mess up a match like this. We have W Morrissey, the former Big Cass, facing Eddie Edwards. And the new match, Matt Cardona and a mystery partner against Bryan Myers and Tenille Dashwood. Who will the mystery partner be? So... anyway, the segment backstage, Scott D'Amore is there, and he's with Deonna Purrazzo. And he wants her to sign this contract. And she has alerted him that she has been told, don't sign this contract under any circumstances for this, because she doesn't know who her opponent is going to be, and D'Amore is not going to tell her. And there are these special stipulations in the contract. Anyway, the whole thing is Scott D'Amore goes, I forget all of them that it was, but it was like, it could be a hot mess. So they're teasing Chelsea Green. Or it could be I forget the term he used, but he was teasing Mickie James. And so finally she gets all mad and she signs the contract without even reading it. So she's in trouble. And then D'Amore goes to leave and she goes, so you're not going to tell me who it is? And he turns around and goes, no way, Jose. So I hope it is actually Deonna Purrazzo versus No Way Jose, because the one thing about this Impact show is they do intergender on Impact Wrestling. They don't do it in WWE. AEW has the same rules. Men have to face the men. Women have to face the women. But in Impact, it's like anything goes. And the reality is, I don't like that kind of intergender. But they got to do something to separate themselves, and they've decided that's one of the things they're going to do. They're going to do intergender matches. I don't like it. If you like it, well, Impact is the promotion for you. And quite frankly, we'll get to that later. We got a lot more to get into after the break, everybody. More news, your feedback, Wrestling Observer Live. Back in the show, Brian Alvarez here, Wrestling Observer Live. Mike Sempervive, also WrestlingObserver.com. A few things to add. So first off, fans return for Slammiversary, by the way. I didn't mention that. People on the chat are like, I can't believe Brian watched Impact. Yeah, I watched Impact. And I enjoyed it. And maybe it'll start to irritate me after a while. But there's a lot of real campiness on the Impact show. But like most of the campiness is reserved for the stuff in between the matches. Like they do a segment backstage. They do a segment at a hotel room, whatever. But it's not like, there's a voodoo doll in the middle of the wrestling ring and a bunch of crap. I don't want to see that in the wrestling ring. If you want to do your goofy stuff backstage, whatever, knock yourself out. But like in the ring, I want to see wrestling.
Wait, hold on.
That's what I saw last night.
But to be fair, in recent times, not one, but 2 people have died on Impact. A child was hit by a car.
Not in the ring. It was in the back.
A child was hit by a car in the ring, and then a man was shot on the ramp, was he not?
I don't know. I didn't see that show.
During his wedding, a man was shot on the ramp.
Well, hey, like I said, if I see dumb stuff, I'll tell you about it.
Hey.
But I didn't see anything that dumb on the show last night.
You're right about one thing. They need to fill a niche. When the NWA came back around the first time around before, everything happened, we saw Ricky Starks for the first time. We saw Zicky Dice for the first time. I mean, not for the first time, but on a national stage, we saw guys, come back. Wade Barrett, LA Knight, Eli Drake, guys like that where they took something and they had a niche for themselves and they carved it. AEW obviously has carved out their niche. WWE's got theirs. How do you stand out and be different? ROH did a great job during the pandemic with their pure wrestling. I was not bullish on bringing that back. As far as the pandemic, if there's a silver lining in things, if you're looking for things, the pure tournament ending up taking place during the pandemic as opposed to the rest of the year when there was all this other stuff going on, it actually enhanced those matches in that show. I can't say anything about Impact because I have not seen an Impact weekly TV show in a long time, and I've only seen the one pay-per-view where Omega won the title. That's the only pay-per-view I've seen from them in a long time, so I don't know what's going on there. But you read the reports, and they have carved their niche by bringing in guys who, look, that 6-man is going to be really, really good. There's a good mix of people that are going to be in that match, including guys like Trey Miguel and Ace Austin and Chris Bay and Rohit Raju that are, they're good, and they're the next wave on the indie scene. Old names like, Willie Mack and Rich Swann, which just seems to be a perfect team, together. They seem perfect for each other, So to have those types of guys and to have a little bit more wackiness, whether anybody likes it or not, if that's the thing that sets them apart and that's the thing that drives interest or continues to latch anybody that happens to be watching for Kenny Omega only, I think this is about the best that they can do.
Did you watch all of Slammiversary?
I watched most of Slammiversary. I did not see some of the middle matches, but I saw the opener and the last half of the show.
Opener was the X Division Championship X Division Ultimate X match. I think I got all that right. Josh Alexander, Petey Williams, Rohit Raju, Trey Miguel, Chris Bay, and Ace Austin. And the first half of this match, I thought was actually really sloppy. Those guys trying to do things that weren't quite working out right. And then the second half of the match actually got a lot better.
It was creative as hell. I mean, that which was probably had to do with the sloppiness in the sense that they had so many ideas, and not all of them worked. But man, did they have a lot of ideas to go through in this match. I thought by the end of the match it was pretty damn good.
Yes, by the end of the match it got good. They had a couple of things, including everybody did a submission on everybody else while Alexander was hanging from the Ultimate X rope. He's hanging from the ropes.
He's hanging from the ropes and he had an ankle lock on. Was it
Chris Bay and an ankle lock.
And then Chris Bay had a choke on somebody.
I don't know why they're still holding on to each other in these submissions, but the crowd popped for it. This was cool. There was a really crowd there.
That was really cool. Yeah, it's like 180 people. It was really cool that spot. I mean, I liked that spot just from like a lot of stuff I liked in this match just because, this was not a let's watch tapes and copy match. This is like what can we all think of that nobody's ever seen? And they had a lot of stuff like that.
We had a destroyer from Petey Williams off the shoulders of Alexander, I believe.
It was,
on Chris Bay, which was pretty crazy.
That was awesome, yeah.
And
it's
finally,
so funny. So what's funny is like I've heard like Petey Williams talk about like that he didn't create this move to be like a transition move, and then he has like 3 of them in the match. But they were good, and it's Ultimate X, and so you can't it's not like people kicked out of it because in Ultimate X there's no pins, so I guess you can justify it that way.
Well, I'm sure nobody created the super kick to be a transition move, but whatever your idea was way back then and whatever it is today, it's all different.
Well, the thing with the super kick is that move goes back 100 years and it was never a finish until Chris Adams did it. Chris Adams used it because I was there when the super kick became a big move, and then Shawn Michaels watched Chris Adams. So anyway, people had been doing thrust kicks. Every Japanese wrestler had been doing thrust kicks like that since, I don't know when, long before Kabuki and Masa Saito and Kenji Shibuya. So you're going back to the 50s. And then Chris Adams, with the judo gimmick, and a super kick is not a judo move, but people were very ignorant of what judo was. So, they pretended it was a judo move. And he did it as a transition move where he slapped the thigh. And other guys had slapped the thigh when they did it too. But he did it, and I was in Dallas when he did it, and it was not a finisher. And then all of a sudden, it became like this move that got the biggest pop because it sounded real. So it became his finisher. He turned it into a finisher. So it actually started for decades as a not finisher. Then it became a finisher with Chris. Then Shawn Michaels watched it and thought it was cool, so he used it as a finisher. And now it's like all finishers from 30 years ago. It's not a finisher now. Now it's
just like the Canadian Destroyer.
Just like everything. Just like the frickin' abdominal stretch and every big move, the vertical suplex, every big move that was a finisher in the previous generation becomes an overused move because everyone is going to pop for it, but it is no longer a finish. So that's just that goes back to frickin' snapmares as a finisher, which in fact they once were, or Irish whips as a finisher, which they once were, and Irish whip was a big time finisher. And the headlock was the big finisher, at one point, and years later it was just a frickin' move that you used during a match. So it's just how wrestling is, and if you study wrestling, it's like you really shouldn't be complaining about it because this is just how it is and how it will always be. And even wrestlers know it because wrestlers will have a finisher, if you'll notice, and then they'll get a new finisher, and then the old finisher becomes a near fall finisher because they've gotten a new finisher. So that's also, you evolve your own game because people want to see something new.
Ends up with Alexander and Bay hanging from the ropes, and Alexander knocked him off and grabbed the title. So Alexander wins.
Yeah, they're really behind Alexander right now. So I expect a lot from him. He's good. I mean, he's
very good.
He's really good. Yeah. I'd like to see him when things open up go to Japan, and the fact he's on New Japan Strong makes me think that there's actually a chance of that.
We had Matt Cardona and his mystery partner Chelsea Green in a cast.
So she was working with the cast.
Yep, versus Bryan Myers and Tenille Dashwood. And funny you should mention, by the way, finishes. So she's got a cast on, and it wasn't a super long match, and there wasn't a whole lot to it. And finally, the women get in there at the end.
Did she do a lot, or was she pretty much protected?
Well, it's funny you should mention the Destroyer. She did a Destroyer on Bryan Myers with a cast on her arm, and hit the end prettier on Dashwood, and she got the win. So good. They said she'd been cleared to wrestle despite the cast. And that was that. The only other big spot was she...
I mean, if she's debuting, she should have won.
Yeah. We had a spot where Dashwood tried to give Cardona the low blow, but of course he had the cup to prevent that.
The old cup gimmick.
Yep, and that led to the finish. So there you go. We had a W Morrissey versus Eddie Edwards. And did you see this match?
No.
It's weird. So... W. Morrissey, the former Big Cass, he's in there with Eddie Edwards, and Eddie Edwards is great.
Oh, yeah.
And Morrissey...
But he is coming back from appendicitis, too.
Yeah, but Morrissey did nothing wrong in this match, and everything he did looked fine, but there was, nothing in the match that it was designed to get him over. He took most of the match. Eddie would make a comeback, he'd cut off again. Eddie would make a comeback, he'd get cut off again. And finally, Morrissey got a chain out of his boot, hit Edwards with the chain, power bombs him, and he pins him. And it was like a showcase for Morrissey. But when it was over, Like I didn't want to see Morrissey again. It was designed to get him over, but it didn't. But I can't figure out why, because he really didn't do anything. It wasn't like he looked bad. It was just there. It was very weird.
You know, it's like he's not great. And you know, to really get over now, you've got to be pretty damn good, because everybody's okay. I mean, like, it's not an era where there's really shitty wrestlers. It's like everybody's okay.
I guess that's true. When I watched him, I thought he's doing nothing wrong. But in 2021, I mean, you got to be a lot better than just doing nothing wrong.
See, before, you know, and there's still people with the mentality that if you're, you know, whatever, 6'8", if you're 6'8" and you're doing nothing wrong, then you're a superstar. But that's not the case today. You know, the case today is that to be a superstar, you got to be, like, really good. I mean, almost might be the exception to that rule, because 7'3" is different from 6'8". You know, 6'8" is tall, but there's guys like that around. You know, they're not a lot of them, but enough of them to where it's not anything new. But like 7'3", we got one guy in the business who's 7'3", and that's it. And you know, they're making him out to be a monster, and so he can be that monster. He'll be, you know, I don't know. I mean, like, he may be the exception to the rule, you know, but like, again, like, the thing that we were talking about the other day with what was it, Duke Hudson, right? The what was that, Brendan Vink, okay, and whatever, Elliot Sexton, and there's probably other names that I don't know that he uses, but anyway, so he's 6'5", and he's got a good physique, and but when you watch him, it's like, so what? You know what I mean? It's like they put him over because he's 6'5", but it's like 6'5" is so what? It's like, it's not Hulk Hogan, you know what I mean? Where 6'5" was a giant back in those days. It's not a giant now. And, you know, thinking he's going to get over because he's 6'5" and he's okay. It's like he was on the main roster and he was the same 6'5", and he didn't get over there either.
We have a promo with Moose about the match with Chris Sabin, and this was a great promo. This Moose was really good. It was good in the match, too. We had a vignette, Long Live the King of Drama, Drama King. I presume it has to be Aiden English, because he was the Drama King. I don't know who else it would be.
Aiden English's name that he's been using on Indies is Drama King Matt, because his first name is Matt. So that's probably who I would presume that's who it is.
We had
so you know, the one thing that's interesting is they're the first round of guys, if you remember, the April releases from WWE are all free and clear, and man, you know, they didn't sign a whole bunch this time. I know they're after Buddy Murphy, and I think AEW is as well. But you know, it's not like last year where they signed a ton of people, you know, coming off of releases.
We had FinnJuice showing up to defeat Madman Fulton and Shera. Sort of like a minute. It was just a squash match. FinnJuice won. Fulton and Shera having problems. And then they showed up later on the show as well. Chris Sabin versus Moose. Well, this was a very good match. Chris Sabin's great. Moose is really good. And most of the match was just Chris working over Moose's leg. And Moose would make these... I shouldn't say he was making a comeback because Chris was the babyface. But they had a spot where they were up top. And Moose grabbed him and hit I don't even know what it would be. Like he did a moonsault with Sabin. I guess it was like an SOS moonsault. Slam off the top rope. Nearly like landed on his head. I think
like the Laredo Kid spot?
Yes. It was
so it's
insane.
It's sort of like a Spanish fly.
It's like a Spanish fly, but an SOS.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a pretty cool move. The Laredo Kid move, yeah.
He had the pop-up powerbomb on the apron. He swung him into the guardrail, just killed this guy in the guardrail. Got back in the ring. They started exchanging these cradles, and all of a sudden Sabin pinned him. So Chris Sabin wins the match here, and this was a very good match.
So they should, in my mind, okay, because I think that like Moose should be protected because he's big and athletic and pretty good. I think Moose should only lose for a purpose. So to me, if Chris Sabin beats Moose, I mean he should be getting a real big match. coming off of that, like with one of the top guys. Maybe, Sabin could go with Omega and have a hell of a match. I don't know if that's the direction that they're going.
It did look like it tonight. I guess you could do it on TV.
No, but for like a TV match. No, I don't think it's a pay-per-view match, but I think you could do it for a TV match, and it would be pretty cool.
We had Good Brothers versus Violent by Design, Rich Swann and Willie Mack, and Falaba and No Way. It was No Way Jose.
They called him No Way Jose.
They accidentally called him No Way Jose, but I think they were only supposed to call him No Way.
Yeah, No Way is his ring name. Yeah.
Yeah. So this match, like, I thought it was underwhelming because
I thought it was average.
The first half of the match, you had all of these guys in there, and so there's so much potential to do so much stuff. But instead, they did the traditional, we got to get the heat on somebody, and it was Rich Swann. And so in order to get heat on him, there's 8 guys in the match, but they keep putting him in headlocks on the mat and chin locks. I was like, what? So finally at the end, we get the big parade of everybody hitting a big move. This is when the match really picked up. And finally, Anderson and Gallows hit the Magic Killer and got the pin, won the titles. Last few minutes were good. First half of the match, like, do some stuff. That's all I ask.
I just thought the match was okay. I didn't, a lot of the match was Gallows. And actually, I thought Gallows was good, but he was a lot of it, and they really built up a spot with, and the people popped for it, too, with the Gallows and Joe Doring, the 2 big guys. They were kind of standing there and just throwing punches back and forth, and people kind of like that.
We had Deonna Purrazzo defending the women's title, the Knockouts title, against a mystery opponent who ended up being Thunder Rosa.
Yeah.
Which begs the question, why didn't you advertise Thunder Rosa being here on this show?
I could not agree with you more. As soon as she came out, I was thinking, like, you had her on the show against Deonna Purrazzo. There's actually people who would have bought the pay-per-view.
Yeah, she's a big star.
If they would have known, like the hardcore women fans that are into like those type of women. I think that, like, because they're both good wrestlers, and it's a unique match. It's like not a match that you think you would see because they're from different companies and everything. So yeah, I think that would like sell some. Not like 1 million, or obviously not 1 million, and probably not even another 1,000, but a couple, 100, 200, whatever. I think that you would sell some pay-per-views with that match, because the mystery thing, it's like, I don't know. Yeah, they should have said, unless it was something like where like the deal was put together at the last second and they had somebody else in mind. But if this was something that had been planned for a month, this was when you're trying to do, one surprise too many.
So they had a really good match, and Deonna worked over her arm for most of the match, and Rosa made this big comeback and hit a double foot stomp off the top. They exchanged strikes. Rosa tried the Thunder Driver, got reversed, and then Purrazzo hit the Queen's Gambit and got the pin. And afterwards, Mickie James comes out, and Deonna's all upset that she's stealing the spotlight, and Mickie says, "I'm not here to steal the spotlight, but I am I'm the person behind this NWA Empower Women's show." I forget the term she used, like the EP.
Yeah, Empower.
EP, yeah, she called herself, the executive
producer.
Yeah, so she says, "I want to invite you to the show." And Deonna basically said, "I really respect you, but I still wish you would have let me have my moment." And she's being all disrespectful, so Mickie slaps her and super kicks her with these giant high heels on. It was a good kick, too. So that looks like it's going to be taking place on that show. Probably Mickie James and Deonna.
No, not on that show. Mickie James is not wrestling on the women's show.
I thought she changed her mind and said she was.
Oh, did she change her mind? I didn't hear that.
I thought she did. I could be wrong.
Okay, that was the last I heard. I was gone all day yesterday, so
I feel like this was a little while ago, because I remember when they first announced it, she said she wasn't on it, and I was thinking, why aren't you on this show? Like,
no, she may be on. No, she is wrestling on the second day on the regular pay-per-view, I think. In fact, I'm almost sure of that.
Maybe that's what it is.
Yeah, but not.
Well, maybe this will be on that pay-per-view.
Well, tomorrow I will ask, and I will get let me write this down, and I will get the answer. We'll have that answer tomorrow night on what, in fact, she's doing. I still have to watch the what's it called? They did a countdown show for wrestling, countdown to wrestling at the Chase or whatever. So I got that in my things to do list to watch tomorrow, along with what was the other thing? Oh yeah, just some other stuff. So there's never, man, it never ends. There's so much product right now, and this week it's like New Japan is going to have big shows on what is it? On Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday this week. So a lot of product, and especially the Sunday's the Tokyo Dome, so that's a big show, and could be an incredible show if you look at the lineup.
Well, speaking of incredible,
yes,
let me tell you, he's incredible on commentary.
Who?
Don Callis.
Don Callis is really good on.
Bro, he saved this show. I shouldn't say he saved the show because it was a good show, but he saved commentary because of all the shows to bring back Matt Stryker, they chose this show, this pay-per-view that I was going to watch.
He's so much better than Josh, though. I mean, it's like he's so
Is he?
So much. I watched that month when he missed a taping and they had all this stuff with Josh, and I couldn't wait for Matt Stryker to come back because he's so. I thought Stryker was good. He was
less irritating than usual on the show.
I wasn't even irritated by him at all, other than he made a comment in the Omega match about there's only like a certain number of people who've beaten like Ric Flair and Hulk Hogan. And the worst part is that all of a sudden, like, I came up with like 4 more names, like, without even thinking. So it's like, I don't know why you did this, because it's like, like Paul White and Luger and Sting, you know what I mean? It's just too many. You know, if you actually thought about it, it's I don't know. It's like one of those things where he'll do that what's it called, the history stuff. And I think doing history in wrestling is cool, but it's got to be like real history. And then when you're botching history, especially like with Bill Goldberg was another one. It's like there's names that everybody knows. You know what I mean? Like everybody knows that, like Sting beating Hulk Hogan and Sting beating Ric Flair. I mean, Sting and Hulk Hogan was like a giant flop of a match, but it was a famous match, and Sting beat Ric Flair a million times. And it's like, you don't even have to think when you go like the only people who ever beaten Hulk Hogan and Ric Flair, and he doesn't mention Sting. That's like, come on.
Well, anyway, Callis was awesome on commentary. Kenny Omega, Sami Callihan, no DQ, and it was a hardcore match. They brought in the pizza cutter early. Omega is bleeding all over the place.
Yep.
And then he ends up sending Callihan into a chair and then gouges him with a fork. So now Callahan's bleeding everywhere. And we got a pile driver off the apron through a table by Callihan, which was... They start brawling in the apron, and there's a table there. I just knew this was going to end in a power bomb. I don't even know why. Maybe because that's what they did, one of the angles they did setting this up, I think. But they did this power bomb through the table, and it was just... It looked so awesome. And then...
Oh, the table broke, and so, like, that was like the... That table break was really, really cool, yeah. But, man, I just, like... these pile drivers through a table, I hope that... I don't know. It's like I'm just. It's like if Kenny Omega wasn't like hurting so bad, it'd be one thing, but he is, and he's still doing. Like, I know he's going to do it because that's just him. He's going to be like whatever it is. He's going to go out there and try to provide the best match that he possibly can in the in every unique aspect of a match, and that's just how he's going to be. But it's just like, man, like. Pile drivers through. There's so many pile drivers in this match. Weren't there like 4 or 5 of them?
Well, there were a bunch of pile drivers, including Omega throwing powder in Callahan's face. So Callihan pile drives the referee. So the referee's out. And then Omega hits a pile driver on Callihan. So he hits him with his own move, but there's no referee. Another referee runs in, and he gets beat up by Kenny Omega. Good Brothers try to interfere. Eddie Edwards and Chris Sabin take them out, so no interference. Callihan gets thumbtacks, and we do a bunch of spots, including the thumbtacks are on the ground, and Omega kneels to the thumbtacks, so there's all these thumbtacks stuck to his knee pad. Then he does the V-trigger with a thumbtack-covered knee pad.
I think that's like kind of really smart. You know what I mean? Because I'm sure that's been done before, but I can't recall it being done like on a major pay-per-view show.
It's smart, but when you think about it, if the thumbtacks are stuck to your knee pad, then when you hit the guy with the knee, the thumbtacks actually go into your own knee, not the guy's face.
Yes. Yeah, I know.
But we pretend because it's wrestling. Yep. So finally, it's the one-winged angel into the thumbtacks, which in fact, the dude went into the thumbtacks, which went into his back. That was, you don't have to think about that one. And he pinned him. And Don Callis screams, "He's dead!" And I was like, well, it is a one-winged angel and a thumbtack. So if there ever was a move where a guy would be dead in pro wrestling in storyline, that'd be one of them. So he's done. And then Anderson, Gallows, Callis, Omega, they're all celebrating. The lights go out. And who of all people should make their big debut here but Jay White? Mm-hmm. And there was a snafu, and the show went off the air early.
No. I was told that it went off exactly as planned.
Well, we all know what happened anyway then. FinnJuice hit the ring, and Jay White laid him out. And apparently, I guess we can watch that on TV this coming week. But
right, it's supposed to be. I don't know if it's on. It's part of the deal for getting the New Japan talent, because it's the Jay White and Finlay is the co-main event for the Los Angeles New Japan show. So I'm sure that we'll see this on New Japan World, and perhaps the part of the deal again to get some of these guys on the show, and especially Jay White and everything is. That they get to do the angle, that they get to shoot that angle for their own show. So that's going to happen. So, I mean, it certainly would appear that there's a Kenny Omega Jay White match coming somewhere in Impact, which, perhaps at Bound for Glory. And that's a really interesting match because they're very different styles, but they're both so awesome. But they're both heels.
This company is a different company than the TNA of 2004, 2005, and everything like that.
It's a different company from Impact from 18 months ago, too.
Yes, but let me tell you something. People still remember Impact. So if you're going to do a thing like this at the end of the show, I think you need to have all three announcers screaming, "We've got to go," and then the guy runs out as the show goes off the air. Because the way they shot it, I got so much feedback from people going, they fucked up. How come the show went off? We didn't see. It didn't come across like a cliffhanger. It came across as a production faux pas.
Absolutely.
Which you do not want if you're the former TNA.
I don't think you ever want that. I mean,
no, but there's a way to do it where we got 3 seconds left, and all of a sudden you see the guy running, and they were out of time. It was the top of the hour. Yeah. I feel like there's a way to do it where feel like
there's 10 or 15 ways to do it, but
this was not it.
This was not the one. Yeah. No, you could go oh my God, we're satellite time is out.
Yeah, anything.
Yeah, and then you do it that way. Satellite time's out. Tune in Thursday night. Tune in Thursday night, and we'll get to see this, and you open Thursday night with this clip. Absolutely, tell people that. Yes. Rather than what they did, because, you're right. I mean, when I watched it, not knowing that, I just thought, oh, God, right in the middle of the angle, they go off the air. Did somebody go long in something? But, so it's there to build up the never open weight title match with Finlay.
That was a hell of a main event, though.
For what it was, I mean, it's different from it's completely different from almost any Kenny Omega match. What is different from any Kenny Omega match I've ever seen?
Well, I mean, it was still absolutely a Kenny Omega match. I mean, you could see how the match was put together. You could see the big spots. You could see the creative ways to go into the V trigger and the one-wing angel on the tacks, and the usage of the pile drivers from the angles, and the guy's finish. There was a lot of really good stuff in this match.
The You Can't Escape, where he does the moonsault with the garbage can on the guy's ankle.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, it was a lot of interesting stuff there. Yeah, I thought the match. I thought that the opener, and I thought that of the matches that I saw, which was most of the show, I thought the opener and the last match were really, really, really good. And I mean, the women's match was good too. But I thought those were the two best.
Is it true that Missy Hyatt is stepping into the ring again?
I don't know how much she wrestled, but she worked yesterday in Impact, yeah. I saw pictures of her, too. She looked in great shape, too.
Wow.
I mean, like, yeah, you know, I don't know how wrestling was. I mean, it was Missy Hyatt and I think it was Bryan Myers against Tommy Dreamer and Rachel Ellering, dressed like Road Warrior Rachel Ellering.
This will be on TV?
I think pay-per-view. July 31st.
Oh, it's a pay-per-view taping, I see.
Yeah, tape pay-per-view for Impact Plus. So it was like a night of mixed tags, and Missy Hyatt ended up being the partner of Bryan Myers. So, yep, she's back. I mean, I'm not saying she's not. I shouldn't say she's back. I don't think that I think it's just a one-shot quickie thing. But it was interesting because I had thought that she had retired, but nobody actually really retires in wrestling except for Jack Briscoe.
All right, we got Impact spoilers as well coming off the pay-per-view. So the new number one contender for Kenny Omega is Bryan Myers.
Yeah, I'm not thrilled by that.
Not expecting that one at all. Didn't Chris Sabin get that big win over Moose, and we were trying to figure out where that was going because he beat Moose and.
Well, yeah, and then Moose beat him back and to make a 50-50 booking. But no, I would have loved to have seen Kenny Omega against Chris Sabin. I think that would have been. I mean. I mean, I can't come up with a good reason for Bryan Myers. I mean, number one, Bryan Myers is a heel, and Kenny Omega is a heel on the show, which is whatever. It doesn't matter, but still, but you know, it's like you only got like a certain number of dates with Kenny Omega, and I would really be, you know, careful and you know, like. I'd want to put him like with Eddie Edwards, or there's so many guys there that are really good. You know, Josh Alexander, even TJP and Kenny Omega would be a phenomenal match. Chris Sabin and Kenny Omega would be a very good match. I mean, and I'm not saying that Kenny Omega and Bryan Myers won't be a good match, but it won't be as good as many of the names we just mentioned. And there's also the perception thing. And I don't know how, again, when you're getting at the Impact level, it doesn't really matter. But Bryan Myers was Curt Hawkins, and you know what I mean? And it's kind of like, do you really want, you know, the guy who was portrayed as Curt Hawkins? I mean, it's one thing if it's one of those guys, okay, in WWE where, like Cesaro, as an example. Like, let's just say Cesaro got fired, okay, and he went to Impact, and they built him up against Kenny Omega. That the people would go like, well, everyone knows Cesaro is great, and everyone knows that Vince didn't see it in Cesaro, and you know what I mean. So the fact that Cesaro was never a top guy in WWE, and now he's like main eventing in Impact, I don't think anyone would, you know, or if he like quit and went to AEW and main evented, I don't think anybody would go, oh, you know, it's just like that shows how weak they are that some, you know, mid-card WWE guys in the main event, because the fan base, for the most part, knows that Cesaro's really good and Vince didn't see it. But I don't know that there's like a big clamor when Bryan Myers was there as Curt Hawkins. I sure never heard it of, man, they need to push this freaking Curt Hawkins. This Curt Hawkins should be in the main events, like, and Vince just doesn't see it because, you know, Vince doesn't see it. I never heard that about Curt Hawkins, and nobody else did either. So it's kind of like, I don't know. I wouldn't be my pick for the match, put it that way.
We got Chris Bay being given a Bullet Club shirt by Jay White, and Mickie James Molina signed for the NWA show.
No, Deonna Purrazzo against Molina.
Deonna Purrazzo versus Molina. How many times am I going to say Mickie James for this?
Mickie James is going to be the producer of that show with help from other people.
Yes.
But yeah, Deonna Purrazzo and Melina Perez, and I think it's for the Impact title too. So Deonna Purrazzo is defending on that show, and also Triple Mania against Lady Shani. But it's against the Reina de Reinas champion because it's belt versus belt. So I think there's a good chance that Deonna Purrazzo is going to come back with two belts like Kenny Omega did.
The Impact show, I mean, there's not really a lot to talk about. It's just a follow-up to Slammiversary. But the important thing on the show was the segment that they did with Jay White. So Jay White shows up very early in the show. They did a quick backstage segment. And actually, he wasn't even in the first backstage segment. But Chris Bay ends up turning around. There's a Bullet Club shirt. So later, Jay White goes up to Chris Bay, asks if he got the message. Chris Bay says, listen, I appreciate everything, but I don't know if you know this about me or not. I'm already a star, and I work on my own. And so Jay White says, how's that working on your own been going for you? And he walks away. So later, Jay White shows up in the building. He's there live, and the place goes crazy.
Bryan says that about my solo shows, by the way. It's exactly how he says it.
Yes. And he comes out, and of course everybody wants to see Jay White versus Kenny Omega, but his promo is about, he actually came here to face David Finlay. And they're facing each other on August 14th at Resurgence, so they're going to shoot some angles there. But he does mention that he is the real belt collector, and this leads to the Bullet Club coming out, and basically everybody gets in an argument about whose Bullet Club was hotter, who should be asking who to join. Jay White saying you guys should, come with me, and they're like, you're not a big enough star, blah, blah, blah. And so it gets into this big brawl. Anderson and Gallows attack Jay White. Chris Bay makes a save. So it looks like we are going to be getting the Good Brothers versus Jay White and Chris Bay. Jay White's match with Finlay is going to be taking place on the New Japan show. And I would not be surprised if we end up getting a Kenny Omega versus Jay White match on one of the big Impact shows. Now, obviously, the question is, what do you do championship-wise? Would this be a match where Jay White is challenging for the Impact title? Would this be a match where Jay White can drop his title to Kenny Omega, the belt collector, and then you deal with that down the road? The thing that's interesting, forget Impact. Well, don't forget him, but this is not just something dealing with Impact, but Impact, New Japan Strong, the main New Japan, AEW Dynamite, and Rampage is coming up as well. If you watch the shows as a fan, it just feels awesome because, oh man, Lance Archer won the IWGP US title from Jon Moxley on a Dynamite show after Jon Moxley had been defending that title on New Japan Strong shows. Kenny Omega is defending the Impact title on Impact shows. Kenny Omega may be facing Jay White in an AEW versus New Japan match on an Impact show. It's all awesome. Don't get me wrong, but I don't have a lot of details, but the fact of the matter is, if you imagine the politics involved with all of this, okay, it's a nightmare, all right? It comes off smooth on television, but I shouldn't say a nightmare, but it is very complicated.
It's challenging.
Who's beating who, when, for what belts, where, what show is so-and-so going to be on, who are they allowed to beat, who are they not allowed to beat, who are they allowed to get... I mean, it is extremely complicated, and if you as a fan are watching it and enjoying it, that's all great, because that's what they want you to do, but you should... be appreciative of the fact that you're seeing it, because there are so many things that should and may at some point prevent you from being able to see certain things in certain places. Was that vague but also in-depth enough for everybody?
I say we call Court Bauer right now on the air, put him on the spot, because he still holds rights to Filthy Tom Lawler, who is your New Japan Strong Champion, who on the 14th of August may choke out Jay White. He may just choke out Jay White, pick up his belt, take it with him, put it along with his belt, and say, you know what? I'm the new belt collector, and he shows
Jay
up
White's
in
got
AEW.
a match on the 14th. That was a nice promo, but Jay White's already booked.
Well, yeah, I know. Look, what I'm saying is, let's get Filthy Tom Lawler all these belts. He should be the belt collector, because I believe in real life he can beat up all these people.
Listen to me. Filthy Tom, he don't tell me nothing. Which actually, it'd be easier if he did tell me stuff, because then when I go on these big speeches and rants, I know what to say and not to say, but he doesn't, so I'll just say it anyway.
You know the timeline better, yeah.
Filthy Tom Lawler is the New Japan Strong Openweight Champion, okay? In what universe should he not be in this year's G1? He absolutely should be, right? I mean, Dave talked about last night, Chase Owens is going to be in the G1 this year, okay? I realize he's the Texas Heavyweight Champion and the KOPW Provisional Champion, but Filthy Tom Lawler is the New Japan Openweight Champion. This guy absolutely should be in the G1 this year. I'm not going to stop until he's in there.
I'm not going to say that you're wrong. Look, Chase Owens is in there because you got to give him something for staying in Japan. And look, it's with travel restrictions, people getting sick. injuries are always a question anyway. I understand why he's in there. But, yeah, I'm not going to disagree at all that if he's willing to do it, Filthy Tom Lawler should be not only in the G1, winning the whole thing and going on and challenging Shingo at the Tokyo Dome.
I want to mention a couple of things from the Impact show as well. Do you know who I am a real big fan of that doesn't get enough press? Moose. This Moose is really good. I mention this every time, but every time I see him, I am more impressed. They had a Moose-Chris Sabin match, and of course, they did Moose and Chris Sabin at Slammiversary, and Chris Sabin won. So, he beat Moose. So the obvious question is, well, where are you going to go with Chris Sabin? Well, the answer is back to Moose. They did a rematch here, and Moose won. So the win by Sabin was not to set up Sabin going anywhere. It was just because we're going to do a series of matches with Moose and Chris Sabin. If you want to say, what a waste, you can, but it's not a waste to me because these matches are really good. They had a very good match in the main event. Chris Sabin's been great forever, but if you've not seen Moose of late, this guy is a very good worker. He's got very good presence. He's got very good promos. This guy, he's good. So anyway, they had a very good main event there. We also had, of course, the debut on Impact of Jay White. He debuted on Impact. Jay White. He debuted in a wrestling match. And they proceeded to beat him and Chris Bay. Not sure that's exactly how I would have done that, but that's what they did. And they'll be doing another series of matches. We got some more matches announced.
The sorriest. Although, you know what? I hope Chris Bay gets something out of this, which is more gigs on Strong and maybe an appearance or two in New Japan proper when things open up. I like him a lot.
And we also had a backstage brawl. It was FinnJuice. They're attacked by Jay White. They're attacked by Chris Bay. And we've got some more stuff coming up. It is not over. I wouldn't have beaten Jay White, and they didn't beat Jay White. They beat Chris Bay, but his team lost. I would have done something different, but that's what they did. We had an Impact show that I watched, and they had a Chris Bay Juice Robinson match, which was a good match, and it was very interesting because Juice Robinson, obviously a New Japan guy working here on Impact, and Chris Bay took so much of this match. He took 80% of the match, and then he won. So it was a very, very strong win from Chris Bay. And then afterwards, he was officially given his Bullet Club t-shirt from Jay White. And so Chris Bay, newest member of the Bullet Club.
Bullet Club Lord Finesse, look at that.
Matthew Rehwoldt, I can't even pronounce the last name. Brother needs a new last name. But the Drama King, the former Aiden English.
Aiden English, yes.
Yes, he and Deonna Purrazzo won the homecoming tournament, so they come out for a promo, and ends up with them being interrupted by Melina again. And Melina introduces Purrazzo's opponent, who will be, of all people, Melina at NWA Empower. Melina Perez.
Oh, I thought you said Molina. I thought we got somebody new in there.
No, Melina.
All right.
We had Jake Something defeating Trey Miguel, Daivari, and Rohit Raju. Listen, I'm fairly new to watching Impact every week, but can someone fill me in on the in-joke of Jake Something and Kaleb with a K? And it's all over this show. As a person tuning in for the first time, I'm like, can Jake get a last name already? And I know he's Jake Something on the Indies as well, but... And Calvin with a K? Okay, I got it. It's with a K.
On the weekend, he's Jake something. That's what I heard.
He looked good in the ring, though. Jordynne Grace and Rachel Ellering defeated Fire and Flava, Kiera Hogan, and Tasha Steelz. And afterwards, they shot an angle where Savannah Evans debuted and took out Kiera Hogan, who I believe her contract has expired.
Yeah,
so may or may not be on the way out, but we'll see. But that was the angle to either write her out of storyline if she's leaving, or I guess if she's not leaving, she'll have a built-in feud if she wants to stay. So they did that. We had Steve Macklin doing a squash, nothing to talk about there. And the main event was Eddie Edwards, Sami Callihan, and Frankie Kazarian versus Omega and the Good Brothers, non-title match. It was a good match. It was a fun match. The highlight, by leaps and bounds, was Don Callis' introduction of Kenny Omega. It was so great. So they do the match, and big schmaz at the end. Babyface make the big comeback. And finally, Omega takes a powerbomb on the apron, or a pile driver on the apron from Sami Callihan. And then Edwards hits the BKP and gets the pin. Callis goes to check on Omega, and then Edwards is jumped again by W Morrissey. The feud that will never end. And Morrissey does this gimmick with his fingers because he's W.
Wait, he's doing one of
W Morrissey.
He's not giving the Wu-Tang W.
He's a one-handed W.
West Side W.
Giant Edge. He's feuding with Eddie Edwards. I like the show. It was fun.
He's a giant edge.
He is a giant edge. You seen the guy?
Well,
he is a spitting image for a giant edge. It's actually somewhat uncanny how much he looks like a giant edge. I guess there's probably a word for a giant edge. Large cliff, that works as well. Yeah, they should call him Cliff. Cliff Morrissey is way better than W Morrissey anyway. He should be Cliff Morrissey because he's a giant edge.
Well, he's got to do... Does he have to do an electric drop?
And he could still do this. He just goes like this because he's Morrissey. Cliff Morrissey.
Well, I guess he could, but see, if he's going to do that, you got to do... What's the falling off a cliff finisher? What would he do? Something
his manager could be Wile E. Coyote.
Oh, he might have some trouble right there with his career, although he can get signed to Acme. I guess that's he'll get a good endorsement deal out of them.
We're going to take your blokes' calls after the break, and text messages and emails and more. All right, we got a bunch of shows coming up this weekend. Obviously, we've been talking about SummerSlam and TakeOver Forever. Rampage we'll be talking about. It's got an Impact show, a UFC, ESPN show. So tell us about Impact.
Well, Impact did a bunch of tapings this week. They taped the next... Actually, they taped two of those monthly pay-per-view shows. They did the one where... I think it's the one where Christian Cage beat Bryan Myers. And then they taped the next one, which I think builds around... I'm not sure if it's a TV or a pay-per-view match, but... Ace Austin wins an elimination match to become the top contender, and then Tommy Dreamer wants a shot at Christian, and they have a match with Ace Austin and Tommy Dreamer that Ace Austin wins. So it looks like it's going to be Christian and Ace Austin, but that was not taped. The show that they taped, which is the Victory Road show, let me get to that. It was... Josh Alexander and Chris Sabin, I know, was one of the big matches on that show, which I heard was really good. That was for the X title, and I know. And then Gallows and Anderson kept the tag team titles over Rich Swann and Willie Mack, and Havoc and Rosemary beat Tasha Steelz and Savannah Evans for the Knockouts tag title, and then they had Moose and Morrissey over Eddie Edwards and Sami Callihan. So that was. That one. They had a Laredo Kid, Taurus, John Schuyler, Jake Something, Suicide, and Trey Miguel 6-way match taped for that as well. So that's some of the stuff coming up. There's an angle with Chris Bay and Hikuleo feuding with Juice Robinson and David Finlay. And no other... nothing else that I would call like big names coming in or anything like that. So, yep, that's pretty much it. They did an angle where Morrissey powerbombed Alicia Edwards during a match with that was during the Moose and Morrissey match against Eddie Edwards and Sami Callihan. So Eddie Edwards helped his wife to the back, and that left Callihan on his own, and he got destroyed. And so that's what happened there.
Tonight, Impact has a pay-per-view Impact Plus. Christian Cage defends the Impact World title against Bryan Myers at a championship match. Jake Alexander faces Jake Something at an X Division match. We've got the Good Brothers, Violent by Design, Rich Swann, and Willie Mack three-way for the Impact Tag Team titles. Petey Williams, Steve Maclin, Chris Sabin, Sami Callihan, Moose, and Ace Austin World Title #1 contenders match. Winner gets the winner of Christian and Bryan Myers. I won't spoil it. Madison Rayne versus Taylor Wilde, Dana Perazzo, and Matthew Rehwoldt. You know what I'm talking about. The Drama King. He's got to get a new last name, even if it's his real one. Gets Molina and Trey Miguel. Matt Cardona versus Rohit Raju. And we've got Tasha Steelz, Savannah Evans, and Falaba. And No Way facing DK. That is coming up tonight. All right, so this Impact show, Lance, what in the absolute name of God was that locker room?
We're just going to jump into that one?
Dude, that's all I got to talk about on this show. I got more to talk about, but that's like the number one thing. And one of your trainees was involved in this, Lance. You need to have the insight. And you used to work there. What's the inside scoop on this thing?
Well, again, I don't know the inside scoop to it, but I think I didn't dislike it as much as you did because I heard you with put it over as just being ungodly terrible. So I was actually expecting worse. But the thing that I don't get, and I'd be curious, maybe I'll text Scott D'Amore after this. Like, I don't understand what it was supposed to be, in that it was painfully clear that they were each sitting in the exact same chair. Like, they're in the same chair with the same leaf behind them, and their sidekicks in the same couch. So it's very clearly a fake interview filmed in two parts and edited together to make it feel like it's live. And I'm like, but why?
Dude.
Like, I have no idea what the hell they were trying to accomplish. Like, why they weren't just in a room having a chat rather than having it with the split screen like it's a satellite hookup, but they're both actually sitting in the same chair. So they took turns and planned this. Like, I no idea. And then I'm also curious, and I've actually asked Don Callis this, because I know he gets a kick out of him, the Johnny Swinger character. I'm curious how many fans today get really what he is.
Oh, I got it.
Well, yes, but
that's not the issue.
But you were around when guys like Johnny Swinger were in the locker room.
Yes.
But it's like, a fan in 2021, do they even get 3/4 of the inside stuff that is Johnny Swinger? Like, I get that you'd get it, and I get it, because I knew many people that were exactly like Johnny Swinger. But I don't know if, because, we mentioned the business has changed so much. It's like no one like Johnny Swinger has existed in the business in probably 20 years. So I'm curious if fans, and again, if you listen to the show and you're on Twitter and you watch Impact, it's like, and if you're under 40 years old, it's like, do you get and understand what the Johnny Swinger character is? I'd be curious to know.
Well, the thing about the entire show to me is, as I watch it, I realize that Jake Something uses that name outside Impact as well. But you watch a show and there's like, we got Jake Something, we have Kaleb with a K, we have the locker room talk where they're all in the same room but they're not. And I realize I've only been watching weekly for like a month now, but I feel like I stepped into some alternate universe with a whole bunch of inside jokes that I just don't get. And maybe the more I watch it, the more I'll get the inside jokes. But as an outsider who has just stepped in, it's like, what is all of this? Like, was he born with is his father like Bob something? Or, I mean, what am I missing here with all of these inside jokes? I don't even get it.
Yeah, like I mentioned, too, in my notes, it's like, I think I will enjoy the show more as I watch it more regularly, because I did feel a bit of that. And it's like, you don't really have an emotional connection to the baby faces, because I'm still trying to figure out who the hell they are. Now, Jake, back when I was with Impact as an agent, that very short stint I had 2 years ago, whenever it was, he was cousin Jake with Cody Deaner, and they were the Deaners. So he was a Deaner. And
so he was Jake Deaner.
Although I don't know if they ever actually called him Jake Deaner, but yeah. He was cousin Jake, and they were the Deaners, so I assume he was Jake Deaner, although I don't know for a fact that they ever actually said both words together. But somehow now he's split from them, and he's Jake Something. I don't understand it. I don't personally think it's a good name, because to me it just feels like you're
you don't say.
He's Jake Something. It's like it's just Joe, back in the
This is
Joe
not
days.
a name that comes across as like a superstar name that you would put, but I've seen it on posters. It's a funny thing, and I'm sure it sells tickets, but I mean, I don't know. Yeah, just Joe did not get over as a big time main eventer.
Yeah, so there's
or above average Mike Sanders.
No. Yeah, and I think as we go through week to week, I think we'll probably get into the characters more. But I think also, too, the culture shock. I do find the show very busy in that, like, every single segment has angles, every single segment had run-ins, every character on the show is an angle storyline. And it reminded me, and let me finish first because it's not as bad as it sounds, it reminded me of the Vince Russo booking.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah, but it's the one thing that people would put Vince Russo over for, in that those who liked him were like, but everybody had an angle, everybody had a story, and everyone on the roster felt like they were involved because everyone was in an angle, because Russo had lots of angles and lots of ideas. And again, the upside is that, at least so far with Impact, their angles seem to make sense, but which isn't necessarily typical of Russo's. But I do feel that it was like very shocking to tune in, because it's just like everything's happening. Like, even at the end of the show, it's like Juice Robinson was jumped by someone for some reason at one moment and was laying dead on the floor. Like, what was that? Like, I don't even know. And, there was that interview with, I don't remember his name, and again, I just watched the show this afternoon. The dude
That's not a good sign.
No, the dude that was being interviewed when we found out that Juice Robinson got jumped and laid out in the back, it's like so much happens. It's like the Eddie Edwards, W Morrissey. I jokingly want to call him Ledge because he's large edge, but hell of a tan on like a kid too. But it's like, the show opens, we got a brawl with W Morrissey's just too long and too hard to say. But it's like that brawl right at the beginning, and then we got into the tag team match, and then we got Juice Robinson jump backstage, and then this guy, and it's just like, it's really jarring to jump in. And I hope as weeks go on, we will get more tied up and get into the characters and stuff and have a chance to absorb it more. But it was very shocking and busy, although I do want to point out, because it's something that I always harp on, they did have a babyface win the first 4 matches before we got the heel main event.
Yeah.
So, and again, it's hard to put a babyface over in a heel match. So it's like they were pretty much 100% of the babyfaces won on the show. So that's a good sign. But I
will say one thing about the show. The one thing that I did like is that even though there was a whole bunch of inside jokes and stuff I didn't get, there were 3 segments on the show. The 4-way opener with Sabin, Sami Callihan versus Moose and Ace Austin, which was just a really fun, exciting tag team match. There was an interview with Christian Cage to set up a pay-per-view main event tonight. And then there was a main event with 2 big hosses that beat the shit out of each other. All 3 of these segments, you could have come in cold off the street, know nothing about nothing, and those would have been 3 entertaining segments.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. Yeah, the tag opener was all action and fun, and like you say, 2 big dudes beating the hell out of each other is something that most people will stop and watch, and they did that really good. And I did like the Christian promo. At the beginning, I wasn't as big on it, but once they got into the last few shots at each other, I thought were really good. I thought Jay did a really good job of... He didn't just bury Zack Ryder, which I think too often, it's easy considering, again, his history with his run in WWE. It would be very easy to just bury him for the cheap pops of it. But I think Jay did a good job of not just doing that. So it's like I'm looking forward to that. And again, I've always been a big fan of Christian. Obviously, he's a very talented dude, so that was good. And I think getting rid of the TNA belt was probably a good call. The other thing I do want to mention, just sort of as a discussion point, and again, another one of my students, but Matt Cardona, his match, he came out with Chelsea Green, and again, they're engaged. And it's like, I believe Matt's the babyface. He was in this match, and I assume he is, and it's like, I don't think it's a good pairing for him as a babyface. And I've always felt this, and for so many years they've done this. But it's like, when the babyface comes out and then his hot girlfriend or his hot wife or whatever come out, and it's like they kiss, it's like, I don't think it helps his popularity. And I noticed it in ECW when Candido finally had Tammy Sitch come out with him. And he'd come out and get a big pop, she'd come out and get a big pop, and as soon as they kissed, they'd boo. And I contend that Lita was more popular and Matt Hardy was more popular when they were Team Extreme and just cool people that hung out together. But when it became boyfriend and girlfriend and they'd kiss, it's like, I don't think that's what fans want out of the wrestling. And I think there's a little resentment to that son of a bitch has got the hot girl. And I don't think it helps babyface popularity. And that's where, Shane Douglas had it with Francine. I had it with Dawn Marie, where the heel comes out and gloats. It's like, this woman's with me, and Shane used to curse and swear, but like, none of you sons of bitches have a hope in hell of ever getting with her. And there was resentment to that. And I think much like, there's resentment towards the star quarterback that dates the hot chicken school. And that's where I think the hot valet, the hot manager, whatever you want to have, works better with a heel, because I got heat because she was with me and wasn't putting, again, she's with me and I'm not even putting her over. It's like there's resentment there. And I just find when it becomes the boyfriend, girlfriend, the husband and the wife thing, I think it tends to not work well. And I think if I were booking and Matt Cardona was going to be a babyface, I wouldn't have the Chelsea relationship on screen. I would keep it off screen. Now, if he was going to go heel, especially he's got a tremendous smirky smile at times. I think if Matt Cardona, the heel, came out with Chelsea Green with that shit-eating grin, I think could get serious heat. And I just think there's a misnomer quite often. And again, I noticed it in WWE at times where it's like, if we put the hot girl with the guy, they'll cheer for sure because she's hot. And it's like, not necessarily, because there's a resentment issue there of I have this and you don't. And I just, when Chelsea came out with him and they kissed, I'm like, I don't think that's helping his popularity.
So before we go, you also wanted to talk about the whole format of the show as a whole.
Yeah, it's something that I've thought about for a long time. And I don't know whether fans would accept it, because currently wrestling format is a live television show. You do the show open, you have the entrance. And it's actually something that I really liked about Impact, in that, like, we got AAA on this show, we got New Japan Pro Wrestling on this show, we got AEW on this show, we got NWA on this show, and Impact. We got like 5 companies on this show. So it really felt like I was staying up in the loop of pro wrestling around the world, with the exception of one company. And I wonder if Impact was done more like ECW television was done, where it wasn't presented as a live 2-hour show, but more as a covering of the Impact Wrestling event, whether it be, again, ECW used to do, the arena was on Friday and the show would air on Saturday. But if it was presented more as a post-produced show, where, again, because they even do, it was Stryker and D'Lo on commentary, where they're standing in front of the Impact banner like Joey used to do in, Ron Buffone's basement. Where it's like, if they just did, hey, we're going to pitch to this match that took place, and that match took place, and it's like, and then in New Japan we had this. I wonder if you could do more of a post-produced show, because so much of the show felt that way anyway. And whether it would make it feel more unique than having it's like, hey, we show open, here's the arena, and try to make it feel like it's actually the live wrestling show like Impact, like Raw, like we've been used to for 20 years. But if you go back and watch ECW television, it was never presented that way. They were showing you the action from ECW, but it wasn't like ECW Hardcore TV was.
Like those old primetime wrestling shows. Let's go to the arena, Gorilla.
Yeah, something a little more like that to make it completely unique. Especially currently. Now, I don't know how long they're going to keep these relationships with anybody, but when we got to see Deonna Purrazzo, win at Triple Mania, and we got to see the Good Brothers win at New Japan Insurgents or Resurgence, which one the New Japan show was. Those two companies putting on shows that sound almost exactly alike, so got me screwed up. But it had both the feel of the old ECW television, and it also had a bit of the feel of the old. There was a Pro Wrestling Plus show on TSN way back 80s, hosted by Ed Whalen, and he covered wrestling from all around the world. And he'd show clips from Puerto Rico and clips from WCCW. And I remember loving that show because it was a way to keep up on wrestling all over the world. And there was an element of that to the Impact show that I really liked because we got coverage from all over the world. They plugged the NWA show. We got AAA. And I wonder if they could, instead of presenting it like the 2-hour live Impact Wrestling television show, if doing a different presentation might be a unique way of standing out.
All right, any thoughts on any of the matches, angles, etc.? Impact,
yeah. Again, the show is still a bit busy, but I do like that predominantly it's a wrestling show. We got a solid opener with Sabin and I'm blanking now. Sami Callihan.
Sami Callihan.
I would have preferred Sabin not become an afterthought after picking up the win, but I liked the finish because they did what looks like the finish, the surprise roll up, and feels like it's going to be for sure 1-2, and it was, I think, one of the best executed. Was that a 3 or wasn't that? Was it 2.99? Where Sabin had the 2.99, and then he just showed urgency of capitalizing on it when he didn't get the 3 and hit his finish and won, and it's like, cool. It's like, that's not your standard finish, but it made perfect sense, and I really liked it. I'm liking getting to watch David Finlay. Obviously, everyone knows I'm like the biggest fan of his dad's work, and also a fan of his dad because he and I have been friends for years. So watching David Finlay work, he and Chris Bay had a really fun match. I think I would really enjoy wrestling David Finlay. I think he'd be a fun guy out there and wrestle and then just fight. Like, no, don't plan a bunch of shit.
This like David Finlay and Jay White and Juice Robinson. This is no disrespect to anybody in Impact Wrestling, but every time these New Japan guys show up and get in the ring, it's like they're so fucking good. And we always talk about, Dave's always talking about, WWE developmental versus New Japan Dojo and everything like that. Forget the New Japan Dojo. Just people that, they go and they start wrestling in New Japan. They get so good. And that's more of a mystery to me, I guess, because they're working such high-quality guys. But, I mean, it's not like they're high-quality guys in Impact or WWE or AEW or anything like that. But they're so crisp. Everything they do looks so good. It's so smooth. These guys are great.
But I think the biggest thing to the New Japan system, shows, whatever you want to call it, is the hierarchy. In that when you start at the bottom and you have to do more basics and fundamentals. You can't just come in and do whatever the hell you want. You have to earn your place and work your way up. And gets you so good at everything before you start adding all of the spices of your menu, so to speak, that they force you to bake a good cake before you start putting icing on it, where I think at the indie level in some companies, they will allow people that can't bake a cake yet to just throw as much icing on something as they want. And that's where, and again, obviously, David Finlay was also trained by his dad, so he's going to have good fundamentals and stuff, but they are. And there was one thing, too, that, and again, the fact that he is so young in the pandemic and everything, one thing that really stood out for me in the David Finlay match, because I noticed it in the earlier matches, and I was wondering if it was a case of being rusty working people, but I thought a lot of the earlier matches, there'd be that pause where the crowd's dead and they turn and start clapping and, pandering to the crowd to get them to cheer. And the crowd would start to clap. And once the clap was, then they'd go back to doing something. It's like the crowd would die by the time they did their move. And I'm like, you're playing the crowd wrong. It's like, don't get them to cheer and then go do something. Do something that makes them go cheer. And in the Finlay-Chris Bay match, if you remember the cutoff spot they did, again, Finlay did a bunch of stuff and was looking good. And he got in and Bay begged off, and David just stayed focused, looked determined, moved towards him like I'm going to kick his ass, and the crowd started coming up for him. And then they cut him off, and it's like the crowd was right where they needed to be to get that emotional reaction for the cutoff, because David didn't stop, look at the crowd and go, hey, please clap for me before I go back to doing what I'm going to do. He just stayed on point and stayed looking aggressive moving forward, and it's like the crowd came up for them naturally. And it was like, to me, that was the sign of the real, more seasoned worker, if you will, in that he did the job part that made the crowd react rather than pause the job. Hey, people, come clap and react for me. Then I'll go back to doing my job. And it allowed me to so much more be into the emotional match because I believed David Finlay was in there trying to fight and beat Chris Bay, rather than he was putting on a performance where he wanted to encourage the crowd to clap for him.
All right, we got a couple of more minutes here. Anything else you want to throw in from the Impact show?
Yeah, the other thing that just I thought was weird, they did the handicap match with the women. They did Taylor Wilde against Tenille.
3 women.
No, 2 women and a dude.
That's right.
Kaleb with a K.
This was not my favorite thing on the show.
No, it almost goes back to the Chris Jericho thing that I mentioned. It's like the babyface asked for this handicap match, and then she ended up getting her ass beat and lost. It's like in the match she wanted, and she lost clean. And it's like, unless it is a Brock Lesnar type, an Andre the Giant type, that has that gigantic physical advantage, it's like, I don't understand why a babyface would want the absurdly unfair fight, especially two other women and a dude. And then when she lost anyway, it's like, well, it's kind of your fault. So I didn't like that. And then the other thing, just sort of not so much on a wrestling standpoint, see, I'm curious, Kaleb with a K, would there not be so much more heat if only Kaleb pointed out the with a K rather than the announcers? It's almost like his first name is Kaleb, middle name with a, last name K. Oh, it's Kaleb with a K. It's like, why is everyone saying that? I think there would be so much more heat.
It would be irritating because my name is Bryan with a Y, but I personally don't care, okay? If you want to spell my name with an I, like it's never bothered me when you go somewhere.
Well, that's because you're a babyface. He's an obnoxious douche.
So my point is, it's even better because it's not like on his Tron, it's Caleb, and he goes, oh, it's with a K. Because, some people do care if you spell it with a K instead of a C. He should be, when the ring announcer says, coming to the ring with Kaleb, that's when he would grab the mic and say, with a K. Yes. Because it doesn't matter when the guy says it. You don't know if he said it with a K or a C. That's even more obnoxious.
But again, I think he should be the one doing it and the only one doing it.
Sure.
Where again, with, the interview lady backstage, oh, my guest, Kaleb. And he's like, well, that's with a Kaleb with a K. It's like, no one cares, dude. Shut the up. And it's like, but the fact that the commentators call him Kaleb with a K, the interview lady calls him Kaleb with a K, it's like, he's no longer the obnoxious douche that's pointing out that his name is Kaleb with a K. I'm doing quotes again. Kaleb with a K is his actual gimmick name. Almost, if we want to go back to it, we mentioned that, like Jake Something. It's like, it would be funny if Something wasn't actually his last name, and he was a completely angry guy. They'd be, oh, it's Jake Something. It's whatever his actual real name was. And like, yeah, whatever, it's Jake. And it could at least be the fact that we just don't care and we're being assholes. And that's where, actually, not that I would do this with Jake Something, but if, what's his name? Spray guy with the Elite. Your favorite numbskull.
Brandon Cutler.
Brandon Cutler. If the rest of the Elite was just, oh, it's Brandon something. And he's like, Cutler. It's like, yeah, whatever. And they just constantly referred to him as Brandon something. And he was like, it's Cutler. It's like, yeah, we know. Where at least there's a story behind it that they're disrespecting him because he's not an important part of the group. Or if Kaleb is the obnoxious guy that wants to make sure everyone spells it correctly. But the fact that it's just his name, I just don't get it. And I just think there'd be so much more heat if he was the one insisting people point out that there's a K.
All right, before we go, a couple of Impact thoughts from the show this week.
Yeah, I had to rush through it today, but I do want to point out that I think they're really good. And it's, I mentioned the Ruby Soho videos that I don't know if she produced them, but she put them out on her Twitter, that were really well done. And they do a few of these with Impact. And Eric Young and his Violent by Design group did one this week with Rhino. And they're mini movies. And it's like, I really like them. Because I think they're very creative, they're very professionally shot, and I think, too, with Impact being in a smaller venue, their backstage segments come off a little hokey, to be honest. I'm not a fan of the Swinger Casino poker game backstage and stuff. They seem a little lower end, but these video packages are so high end, the thing they did, and I like them even more in that they have that cinematic quality to it, but doing cinematic matches I wasn't a fan of because it's so clearly not really a match. And when Eric Young is just presenting a Violent by Design video, it's like it's supposed to be shot and edited to present a story that he wants, so it makes sense that it's got that cinematic presentation to it. So I think those are really, really strong. I wanted to touch on, because I'd be curious your take on it. The last couple of weeks they've been doing the thing with Cardona and Chelsea against Rohit and Maliba Shera. And, Chelsea's been slapping, the two guys a lot, and they're building to the, they did the intergender match thing. And they showed Rohit hitting Chelsea with the jumping knee strike. And they presented it as being this horrible, immoral thing that, can you believe he did that? And this is one of my problems with intergender wrestling. That if him doing a jumping knee strike and hitting this woman in the face and pinning her is something that is supposed to be appalling and bad, why is Impact Wrestling promoting it? Like, if her being in this match is perfectly acceptable to book and promote, and she can hit these guys all she wants, then he should be able to knee her in the face as many times as he wants. And it should not be appalling. It should be equality. And if you believe that it is appalling and isn't equality, then intergender matches should not happen. And I think you're just in a contradictory situation of these matches aren't allowed, and I'm going to do a jumping knee strike and hit Miss Elizabeth, and it's appalling and it's horrible because she's a valet on the outside, and a 230-pound man should not be kneeing a woman in the head, and I'm a heel. Or wrestling matches are wrestling matches, and women wrestle guys all the time, and they have. Kaleb with a K has been wrestling the knockouts for a while now. Then it's just acceptable, and you shouldn't play the, oh, can you believe he did that? That's horrible. He kneed that woman in the face. I don't understand presenting both sides of this.
Well, Lance, there's a lot of things in wrestling that I don't get, and one of them is, as you noted, he hit her with a move in a sanctioned wrestling match. Like, what did he do wrong? They're playing it up like he did something horribly wrong. It's just like Vinny and I talked about last night. Anytime you do a match and you hit somebody with a move, and the referee pulls you off because we got to make sure that the person who got hit with the move is okay. It's like, isn't that every fucking move? Like, that's every move you're trying to hurt the person. Oh, well, because then it's all of a sudden, well, they might really be hurt. And it's like, so now you've killed the illusion of the match. Or the other one, I liked Carl Anderson and Rich Swann in the Bunkhouse Brawl, but it's a fucking bunkhouse brawl. There's no DQs, and they literally distracted the referee so that Gallows could interfere at the end of the match. I'm like, what the fuck? What are you out of the ring for? Just get in and beat this guy's ass 2-on-1. There's no so there's
he was in the ring in front of the ref earlier.
Yeah, at the beginning it's just 2-on-1 match, and Rich Swann is just kicking both their asses. Then it breaks down to a normal match, and he's just patiently standing outside. Then they distract the ref for the finish. I'm like, fuck, dude. To me, all I want is consistency. If you're gonna do men versus women, then it needs to be total equality. And, the funny thing, too, is probably an unpopular thing, but you ever notice how sometimes people get really upset that the women are put in skimpy outfits because they're like, oh, we don't want to see them as sex symbols. We want to see them as real wrestlers. It's like, what the fuck? Randy Orton's in his fucking underwear. He's got no fucking clothes on. Like... You know what I'm saying? You want equality, but you don't really want equality.
Lex Luger put baby oil on.
Yeah, you don't want to be sex symbols, so you want to cover them up completely. But then the dudes are out there they're wearing nothing. Like, is it equality or is it not equality? That's the thing. And if it's going to be equality in intergender matches, then if you hit her in the face with the knee, why is this a fucking story?
Yep. Although for a consistent, I do want to put over. I really liked the angle they did throughout the show with. D'Amore booked the 10-man, and Jay had to find 5 partners, and Ace Austin had to pick a couple as well. I guess he needed 3 partners. And Christian's a babyface, and he just goes back and finds big star babyfaces and say, can I count on you? And they're like, sure, dude.
Yeah.
It's like, babyface has friends.
He has friends, and he has people to respect him and want to team with him.
Yes, and they did a really great job, and... Again, it was a few years ago. I don't know if you were watching, but obviously there was the big buzz when Sami screwed up in that spot and, broke Eddie Edwards' face with the baseball bat. And, they turned it into this really big heated angle. And I'm so happy that Sami's a babyface now, and they're trying to do get Sami and Eddie on the same page. And it's like, Eddie just doesn't, like in far too often in wrestling, just go, oh, he's a babyface, yay. It's like, he still remembers that this son of a bitch broke his face. And
from
it's like,
years ago.
He's like, I don't trust this son of a bitch. And that's where I really liked when Cage asked both of them. And Eddie's like, dude, I'll be there for you, but not with him. Pick which one of us you want. I'm not doing it. And it's like, it felt real. It's like a guy with, a conflicting opinion. And then I thought it was good, although it was weird because she vanished. I don't like magic. I don't know where she went. But using Eddie's wife with the, everybody running in at the end segment, Sami saved Eddie's wife. It's like, okay, if there's something where you might bury the hatchet, so to speak, it's like, I don't know who your most hated person in the world is, Brian, but if the dude saves Whitney from a serious injury, it's like, you might rethink hating the dude.
Sure.
So it's like, I liked that they used that. It's like, that's a logical step that I can buy. Now, I don't know where she disappeared to when the lights went out and Sami came out. But it's like, I thought they did a really great job of storytelling to explain why Eddie would give this guy a second chance. And I think saving your wife is that one, wife or child would be a big one. So it's like I liked that, and I thought the build throughout the show to this 10-man main event next week on Impact was really good. And so I thought as an overall story arc, I thought the show was good. And again, I like...
an underrated thing I liked on this show? They did a contract signing, and you know how these contract signings go. They're usually just complete bullshit.
The Josh Alexander, Chris Sabin?
Josh Alexander, Chris Sabin here. It was just a low-key backstage contract signing. And, they both signed the contract, and then they both kind of promo on each other, and then away we go. Scott D'Amore is presiding over it. And what I liked about it is you're watching it, it's 2 baby faces. And they're doing this promo, and they shake hands afterwards. But there was that thing about it where as a viewer, I totally felt like 3 things can happen here. They do a babyface match, and they both remain babyfaces. Or Alexander turns on him, or Sabin turns on Alexander. And I liked that there was... It made me interested in it. You know what I'm saying? Like, when I watch... and this is not a knock on AEW because I actually very much, I mean, if there's one company where I really appreciate the booking, it's AEW, and I can tell where they're going 95% of the time because it's logical. It makes sense where it's going. You watch WWE and it's pointless to even try and figure out where everything is going because they're just going to do whatever. There's no rhyme or reason to it. They'll do swerves that don't make any sense just for the sake of it. I liked a simple angle where I have no idea what's going to happen here. And all three could potentially be interesting scenarios. Sabin's older, multi-time champion. He's going against this young guy who's threatened to, you can't beat me, blah, blah, blah. Is he going to turn? Is Alexander going to turn on him? There's a lot of ways you can go, and I like that.
Yeah, because that's, to me, you can engage me emotionally, and I've mentioned this on the show many times, it's like, engage me intellectually, make me think about something. And I think that's, too, where it's really good in, I didn't feel like the show tried to manipulate me in any way into thinking about it one way or the other. It's like they just presented a situation and allows you to speculate. It's like, okay, there was the great thing with, Josh has never lost his championship. Sabin's lost it 8 times. A bit of a cheap shot because, Sabin's been around longer than you. And Sabin was low-key. I could totally see him turning heel out of this if they wanted to. And there's a lot of possibilities to that match. I agree. That was a good segment. And I'm a big fan of David Finlay. So I liked Finlay and Chris Bay. Although I think the last 4 matches on the show all had distraction finishes. They needed it in the main because they had to get those guys out there for that big, schmoz and the thing to set up with Alicia to get Eddie and Sami on the same page. So they needed it in the main, but they had, a distraction involved in the finish, and I think 4 matches in a row, which I think was poor.
So we have a little news coming out of this. Tommy Dreamer has been suspended from Impact Wrestling as a result of comments made on the Dark Side of the Ring episode that aired on Thursday evening. John Pollock of Post Wrestling obtained the following statement from the company, quote, "We are aware of Mr. Laughlin's comments," that would be Tommy Dreamer, "on Dark Side of the Ring. The views expressed by him in the interview are completely unacceptable. We can confirm Mr. Laughlin was suspended this morning with immediate effect pending further action." More from WrestlingObserver.com. Tommy Dreamer will not be at this weekend's set of Impact Wrestling TV tapings in Nashville, Tennessee. His future on SiriusXM's Busted Open Radio also in question, following controversial comments on the latest Dark Side of the Ring. The Impact news was first reported by Fightful, who said that staff was informed of his absence during a production meeting Friday. The company has 3 days of taping planned starting today. Dreamer is part of the creative team, occasionally still working matches. He came under fire following Thursday's Dark Side of the Ring that focused on the, quote, plane ride from hell, in which a group of WWE wrestlers got heavily intoxicated prior to and during a 2002 international flight back to the United States, an embarrassment that WWE that resulted in several firings and a lawsuit settlement. Dreamer, who was on the flight, defended Ric Flair, who was accused by flight attendant Heidi Doyle of exposing himself to her, pushing her up against the back door of the plane, and putting her hand on his genitals. Flair has denied the claims. Dreamer said Flair is, quote, not going to impose by force any sexual stuff onto anybody. He's just flaunting, styling and profiling, like the Ric Flair stuff where everybody's going to laugh about it. Obviously, somebody took offense to it. He later said Flair was being portrayed as a sexual predator. It's a joke. It's a gag. Today, 1,000% inappropriate, he said. I have hung out with Ric Flair and have never seen him force his will against anybody. On the settlement with Doyle following the incident, Dreamer said, quote, it's how she felt. Maybe she should have not taken a payout and went to the fullest extent of the law to put this heinous person in jail. My opinion. On Friday's Busted Open, where Dreamer is an occasional co-host, Dave LaGreca said they were taking the situation, quote, very seriously and don't condone any of the behavior displayed on the show. They did not go into detail about when and if Dreamer will be back, but only that they are taking the situation seriously and, quote, what will happen will happen. Dreamer nor Impact, well, we actually got the comment from Impact after this was written, has yet to comment publicly on the episode. We've also got Victory Road coming up on Sunday for Impact Wrestling. Christian versus Ace Austin for the championship. Josh Alexander, Chris Sabin for the X Division title. Good Brothers versus Rich Swann and Willie Mack for the tag titles. DK versus Tasha Steelz and Savannah Evans for the knockout titles. Eddie Edwards and Sami Callihan versus Moose and W Morrissey. FinnJuice versus Bullet Club. Matt Cardona versus Rohit Raju, no DQ. TJP, Petey Williams, and Steve Macklin in a three-way. Taylor Wilde versus Tenille Dashwood. And Laredo Kid, Black Taurus, and John Schuyler versus Jake Something, Suicide, and Trey Miguel in a six-way scramble. Now, I have a question. I'm going to ask Lance this as well because Figure 4 Daily today, 2 Pacific, 5 Eastern, myself and Lance Storm live for our top-tier YouTube subscribers. It's new Friday time slot, 2 Pacific, 5 Eastern. We review Impact every week. But for those of you, if there's anyone on the Twitch chat here that watches Impact, last week on the show, Christian was trying to amass a team for this week's show. All right? He was going in and he's asking all the baby faces, will you team with me? He asks Sami Callihan and Eddie Edwards. Eddie Edwards says, I will not team with this man. It's him or me. And he walks out. I thought I liked that. Interesting. These two men should hate each other. Sami almost killed this guy with a baseball bat legit several years ago. So then I tune into the show this week, and they're just on the same team. What did I miss and where? Why are they on the same team now? What happened to it's him or me? Someone needs to explain this to me. That was a big-time faux pas. And then they're teaming tomorrow. So what happened? Anybody?
It's a quality control issue, brother. That thing happened online or something like that. You got to bring it to the table. Bring it to the people. Either that or you just missed something because you were fast forward.
Well, people are saying I did miss something. He saved his wife last week, and they did a backstage. Did I not see that on the show?
Wait, the same Sami saved Eddie's wife? Didn't he try to kill Eddie's wife or kill Eddie, or didn't he get
Well, he did that a
involved?
long time ago. Apparently, I missed that part of the show last week, which is possible. I think I watched everything but the main event, and then I forgot to watch the main event. Is that when it happened after the main event?
Impact, the only place that women don't have long memories then, because, I
praised
really?
the show, but did I praise the end of the main event? I must have missed the end of the main event. I watched this, by the way, on YouTube. Maybe they cut it out.
If you're
Well, now I know.
If someone tried to kill you and threatened your
Lance
wife,
did praise that. That's right. He brought up my wife.
do you think your wife would be okay with, all of a sudden now, this guy trying to do something nice, all that would be erased away from before?
Yeah.
It's crazy to me.
Interesting. I didn't miss the show, you dummy. I missed the last part of the show.
Who are you yelling at?
This guy on the chat here.
Oh.
Actually, the same thing happened on Monday for the Filthy Tom show. I was watching New Japan Strong, and I had an issue with a child screaming at the top of her lungs. So I left to take care of it with 10 minutes left on the show, and I didn't watch the last 10 before Filthy show. It happens sometimes, everybody. What do you want me to do? You want me to go back in time? Didn't we just talk about this?
No, yell at yourself.
I can't go back in time.
Everybody else for making
the
mistakes.
only thing that's real is right now.
Do.
I can't go back in time. I can't
That's
go forward.
You know
I can't
what's
go
real?
forward and give you spoilers for a live show.
You know what's real is your patheticness right now. You should take a mirror out right now. Yes, you are.
Why?
The way you yell at everybody else about mistakes, and then you talk about mistakes, and your mistakes are more coming off like excuses of why you didn't get something done.
You can't know the
Blaming
future.
it on the child.
Jay Wiki
Yell
wants
at
the
yourself.
future. You can't have the future. The closest you'll get to the future is the prediction show we do every year, which I am currently winning. So for once in the history of man, I saw the future.
Agreed. Let's hit Impact quick because we haven't in a while. We don't want to leave the poor Impact fan base out of the loop here yet.
Well, I really want to talk about Tenille's show, Lance. That's first on the list here.
Oh, yeah.
What is this? Help me. You work there.
They weren't doing this segment when I was there. I don't know. I had in my notes talked about, plus and minuses of the Impact, and it's like, I don't understand the Swingers Palace backstage stuff. I don't understand the Tenille Dashwood backstage interview stuff. And again, it was a show that I'm drawing a blank. Who's her partner? Her cohort, Madison Rayne. Like Madison Rayne used to do the backstage locker room talk segment, which has just been transformed and moved over to Tenille's thing. But yeah, I don't get these segments. I don't particularly think they're good. Like I get a lot of the inside jokes of the swinger stuff, but I don't know if the fans get it. And actually, I was DMing Paul Fontaine today, and he's a big fan of the Swingers Palace stuff. And I guess there's a movie that has this similar shtick to it, and I don't get the reference, so I'm at a loss with you. I think there's a lot of good wrestling at Impact, which again I think is really picked up with the addition of, Christopher Daniels is currently wrestling on Impact. Christian Cage is wrestling on Impact. You've got FinnJuice. Jay White wasn't on this week, but he's been on in recent weeks. So the caliber of talent in ring has been really going up in Impact Wrestling. But yeah, some of these backstage segments, like the Tenille talk show segment, they have me at a loss.
How about the matches? I thought the matches were good on the show. The opener was good. The main event was good. As you noted, these New Japan AEW guys are just such great workers. And we got a pay-per-view coming up this weekend, which they were plugging. They were also plugging Bound for Glory. There's a lot of stuff being plugged on these shows.
Yeah, it's a busy show. I think they do, and it's... I think I mentioned last time we talked about Impact, but it's like when every match is an angle or a story, and yeah, there's the Knockouts tournament thing this weekend, and then Bound for Glory is, I think, the 16th. So they're plugging and cutting angles and doing build for two different pay-per-views, and I think that at times is a negative. Like just they did the thing with the women's six-man where Tasha Steelz refused to tag in Mercedes Martinez, and they're doing the tension because they're going to be wrestling in the tournament on the show. And it's like then in the main event, they're doing the can Josh Alexander and Christian trust each other because they're main eventing Bound for Glory for the title. I'm like, it's the same angle in two segments. It's like, I don't think this is good. I think, for the sake of the world title, it's like I'd leave that story and angle alone for Christian and Josh. And
well, if I may jump in, Lance, I believe that the stories are somewhat different because I don't think that it is that Alexander and Christian don't trust each other because they have both professed mutual respect for the other, but I think that they're a little bit wary as opposed to flat out, I don't trust this guy.
Well, yeah, but I think that's too subtle of difference because, again, they did work together somewhat. It's Mercedes started the match, and it's just tension and tension between partners. I would consider all of the same. And then again, they did the blind, and I thought this is where I hate when they overdo things, and I don't mean Impact specifically. I mean wrestling in general. When they overdo things, it's like, way too often they do the guy blind tags, his partner in and steals the pin, and it's like they do it for no reason. It's like, I thought they did a really great job of it with Christian and Josh Alexander. And, Christian's great, but it's just he did the blind tag and just the subtle look, and I'm like, that's a great finish. And I assume that, because I'm a big fan of Josh Alexander, I worked with him a little bit. He had just, I think, started in Impact when I was there. But it's like he's really coming into his own and he's really standing out. So I suspect that'll be a fantastic match, and I think they're doing a really good job of building it up.
The other thing I wanted to mention is that there's one thing about Impact that just it feels very antiquated, and that is the, quote, knockout division. Because we're now in an era where even WWE, not only is it no longer the Divas belt, but that is now on the ban list. You can't say the word diva in WWE. It's women. It's the women's title. It's the women's evolution. AEW, it's the women's title. The TBS women's title. And then you turn on Impact and we've got the knockouts. Just seems a little behind the times.
It's funny, and again, obviously I haven't talked to everyone, but I'm 99% sure the vast majority, if not all of the women there, like the designation of the Knockouts division. And I think it's a better name in that knocking someone out is a thing. Being a knockout, so it's like there is the female compliment of, wow, she's a real knockout. But there's also, and I think this was the intent when they named it, which is why I liked it so much better than Diva, is that these knockouts will knock you out. Where, again, to me, Diva has always been, and it is, if you look up in the dictionary, the definition, it's a negative term about a high-maintenance, bitchy woman. It's like it was never a compliment. But at least being a knockout is a compliment. And I think with the being KO'd, I think was sort of the intent behind the name, which is why I think the women like it, is that, these women pack a punch. So I think there's more of a positive spin you can put on the Knockouts name. And I think always, for the most part, like when they first started the Knockouts, it's like it was a strong, like one of the stronger divisions and segments in the company. So I don't think it ever had a negative connotation put on it. So I don't see it that way. Now, if you wanted to just switch it and call the women, I wouldn't argue with you. But I do know that most, if not all, of the women there like the Knockouts designation.
The former Iconics signed with Impact, right?
Yeah, here's the news from today. As you noted, the former Iconics, which would be Cassie Lee and Jessica McKay, have signed
the former Billie Kay and Peyton Royce. Yeah.
Yep, they've signed with Impact. They'll be debuting at the Bound for Glory show, and tonight they had the Knockouts Knockdown tournament, which was won by Mercedes Martinez, who beat Tasha Steelz in the finals. So
Mercedes Martinez, no doubt, is with them full-time too then.
Yep. She was on the TV this week and then ended up winning this tournament. And I didn't see the show. I actually didn't see that show or the GCW show.
Yeah, I ended up watching, as I mentioned last week, the Impact show didn't go up in time. So I ended up watching last week's Impact, like yesterday, and late last night I watched this week's show. And on the whole, it's a good show that builds logically to Bound for Glory. And I think the two things that I want to talk about primarily, the build of Josh Alexander for the world title match with Christian, they did I think it was like 8 minutes or something, but a really long video package last night on the show. And I thought it was really good. And it was Paul Fontaine that mentioned on Twitter, it's a shame that, AEW and WWE can't do 8-minute video packages like this, because they tend to lose viewers and their ratings death, but it really does a great job of building for the pay-per-view and telling the story you want. And I thought they did a really great job with Josh, although I did want to point out, and I mentioned it to Paul, I was DMing with him, there was one minor mistake in the story they told, and I was like, as soon as he said it, I was like, no, you ruined the whole story. It reminds me of the Renee Paquette story on Ariel Helwani's show about Vince yelling at her for fucking up the story. That he talked about, as a kid, all the troubles he had in getting into wrestling, and then there was that moment where he got tagged at the border and basically told, if you try to go into the U.S. for, wrestling again, we're going to ban you. And he was stranded then in Canada and couldn't, reach the goal he wanted to. And he told the story about, I don't remember the man's name, but the guy behind Destiny Wrestling that gave him a chance. And then he says he won the Destiny World Championship. And I was like, no! It's like, the story was that he couldn't go international anymore. He was trapped in Canada. And then at the Destiny show is when Scott D'Amore from Impact Wrestling showed up and offered him a 3-year contract. And it opened that international door for him again. And that's what revitalized his career, motivated him to go on to further things. And this is his shot at the World Championship. And I'm like, you messed up the story. You should have called it just a heavyweight title. You should have called it the Canadian Championship. anything but a world title, because the story is Impact Wrestling opened that international door. It allowed him to come to the States. It allowed him to revitalize his career and to achieve that goal, hopefully at Bound for Glory, of becoming a world champion. And it was a great story, a great video package, but that one word, by claiming to be a world champion in Destiny Wrestling, it's like, no, you lost the focus of the story. And it's something I want to talk about with WWE later. It's that overworking something. It's like the indie promotion that claims to have a world championship. It's like, dude, you run 3 cities that are 150 miles apart. You're not a world champion. And by claiming that Destiny Championship is a world title, it lessens the accomplishment, should he win on Saturday at Bound for Glory, of achieving that dream and becoming a world champion. And it was a really great story, other than that one word slip up. But I think they did a really tremendous job, and it's going to be, I think, a tremendous match. I've become a big fan of Josh Alexander. I think he's tremendous. I first met him when I did my short agenting run with Impact before I went back to WWE. And he's really, really stepped up his game and come into his own. So I'm excited for Bound for Glory, and I'm excited for him for that. And then the other thing, while I don't generally like adding more titles, before you
get to that, I want to add one thing to what you just said. I didn't see the show, so I didn't see the video package, but you described it as an 8-minute, very good video package. And it would be nice if they could do this on some of the other shows. They did a video package for, of all matches, Raquel Gonzalez and Mandy Rose on NXT 2.0 this week. And, for whatever reason, when it was over, I was like, man, I'm more interested in that match now. It was a really good video package, but the key is it was only a minute long. It was not an 8-minute video package. And I do believe that we should see more video packages for Raw and SmackDown, and even AEW as well. And if you have someone who is really good at their job, and I don't know that Borash did that video package, but there's certain things that he does. Usually it's drone shots, and there were no drone shots, but there were some slow motion stuff, and it wasn't like your typical WWE video package, so I presume he did it. But regardless, I think we can all agree that Jeremy Borash is very good at his job. If you've got a Borash who is capable of doing what he does, you can have a great 1-minute video package. You don't have to sit here and have 8 minutes of the show dedicated to it and be worried that people are going to switch the channels. It can be done in a shorter amount of time. And they managed to do that with that particular match, which I had no interest in going in.
Yeah, I don't think you could have told the Josh Alexander story, at least not the one they told, because it really was his entire career, back with the neck injury and the border. And again, maybe they could have cut it down to, 3 to 5, but, again, Impact isn't probably as much of isn't as tight as far as, watching the ratings and concerned of every ratings point for every quarter hour, so they could do this. And it was a really good job.
Well, the other thing, too, is it's Bound for Glory. It's the go-home show for their WrestleMania. And you don't need to do it every time, but if it's the go-home show for the world title match at your WrestleMania, you could do 8 minutes.
Yeah, and I
Max, please.
Yeah. I think the other thing, too, is with Impact, it's like the hope is this is their big pay-per-view, that they might actually pull some buys off it and make some money. But when you're talking, WWE as the more primal example, that they don't make any money if more people are interested in the pay-per-view. They make more money if the ratings stay well. So it's like they're a slave to the ratings because pay-per-view doesn't matter. Where, again, AEW, obviously, they've got the 4 pay-per-views where revenue does matter. So they at times, and again, they've done that often on their go-home shows, where their go-home shows may not be the best rating because they are hyping the pay-per-view so much more. But again, they're hoping to make that back with pay-per-view buys. The other thing, the digital media title, which is interesting, and it just something that can be debated for better or worse. It appears that this is a non-gender-based title in that they have both men and women competing for this digital media title.
Oh, there's no two ways about it. It is flat out an intergender title. Anybody can compete for it. Secondary title, men, women, whatever.
Which, yeah, and this gets into the debate about intergender matches, and as I've mentioned before, I'm not a big fan of them. I think they can be done well. I actually thought they did a great job when Tessa won the Impact World title. But it got me thinking, and it's like, Impact, I think, to get to another level, it's like they need to find a unique identity, and it's such a hard marketplace right now in that there was that time when WWE had, a bunch of pillow fights and divas and weren't really doing women's wrestling. And Impact really stepped up with the knockouts with Gail and Awesome Kong for a BFG tie-in because Kong's going in their Hall of Fame, where the knockouts were a very strong women's division when WWE didn't have one. And when there wasn't the high work rate cruiserweight style, the X division was Impact's calling card. And it's like they're in that hard spot where you've got a pretty solid, where again, I think it could be booked better, but they've got a lot of really good women wrestlers in WWE. So it's like the strong knockouts division doesn't really stand alone. And every company, for the most part, has a prominent women's division now. And you've got AEW with, Kenny Omega, the Young Bucks, Adam Cole, a very, very high work rate. And again, there's a lot of really great heavy work rate guys in WWE as well that, like, the X division isn't really unique and special anymore. So it's like, what is that identifying uniqueness that Impact can have? And it seems to be that intergender is one of the cards they've decided to play. And it'll be interesting to see how this digital media championship does. And I think they need to be careful because there was a battle royal on the show last night. And it created the problem in my brain in that, again, I think Tessa, when booked really well, did well in the intergender matches. But when you just throw it wide open and you see a Chelsea Green in there with Falaba or Moose or, W Morrissey, and you start realizing this is an absurd size and strength differential here that I think it creates problems, but I can understand why Impact is trying to find their uniqueness, trying to find what they can offer. And I think the unique thing that I like about Impact currently is we always hear about the forbidden door, and it's like, I think Impact should stop mentioning it and just start raising the question. It's like, why does anybody have a door in the first place? We never have. And talk about the fact that they've got New Japan guys on Bound for Glory. They have AEW guys on Bound for Glory. They have AAA guys on Bound for Glory. They have Impact people on Bound for Glory. They have Ring of Honor people on Bound for Glory. And Impact is the place with no borders, no doors at all. We don't need to forbid them. We don't have any. I would rather that as a stronger pitch than the intergender.
Yeah, I've always not necessarily been a fan of intergender wrestling, but the more of it that I watch, I mean, it's obvious that it's how it's done. The intergender matches that they had in Lucha Underground, oh my God, a disaster. Just dudes absolutely beating the shit out of these women. And you could see when we got the numbers that it drove off viewers. That's one of the main things that led to the beginning of the end of this company. There were other reasons as well, but I can't remember one intergender match that I've seen on Impact Wrestling where I was like, this is just not, like, if my wife watched this, she'd be absolutely appalled at what she's seeing. There is a way to do it well, and there's a way to not do it well. And so far, in the matches that I have seen, I feel that Impact has done it pretty well. So I don't have a problem with it.
Well, I think they do a good job of not getting into that violence line where you just see a dude,
Yes, it should be a competition between a man and a woman.
But the issue
not a violent beating.
Because I'm a detail guy and I like my psychology, the thing that struck me this week, and there was a 6-person mixed tag, that they did the good job, if you will, of keeping it like they're doing spots and stuff, but it created that problem of why is someone with a distinct size and strength advantage whipping people off the ropes rather than doing things when they're hanging on to someone? And that's where the wrestling brain in me doesn't work, because I like the styles create fights, and it's like, so if you have Chelsea Green ducking and moving and, hitting Fallah Bah, and then he grabs her, and it's like, okay, why are you sending her off the ropes? It's like you have the strength advantage. This doesn't make sense. And then it starts feeling like an athletic display and not an actual wrestling competition. So I think they have to really walk a tightrope. And that's where, again, I think it worked better with Tessa, because Tessa was such a strong physical presence. And again, they kept her for the most part. I remember I agented a match where she wrestled Madman Fulton. But, with Sami Callihan not being a towering giant, Tessa going in there and trading with him, it seemed to work because the matchup made a little more sense.
We also had the Bound for Glory show here tonight, and a lot of things happened on the show, including Josh Alexander beating Christian to win the title, and he wins the title. It was an ankle lock finish, by the way, so it was a submission, and they bring his family into the ring, and everybody is celebrating, and all of a sudden, Moose's music hits. And they had done a match earlier in the evening where the winner, it's basically like Money in the Bank, the winner can get a shot at any belt they want at any time. And he had won. And Call Your Shot Intergender Gauntlet match was won by Moose. And so Moose comes out and he says, I want a shot at your title. And they ring the bell and he spears him and pins him in 7 seconds. So Moose is the new Impact World Champion. And Josh Alexander had a 5-minute title reign. So obviously that's going to be an upcoming feud. We had Mickie James winning the Knockouts title from Deonna Purrazzo. So she ends that reign. It went about 13 minutes. We had the Good Brothers beating FinnJuice and Chris Bay and Hikuleo to retain the Impact Tag Team titles. We had, as noted, the Intergender Gauntlet match. We had Heath and Rhino beating Violent by Design. Trey Miguel won the vacant X Division title, which of course had to be vacated by Josh Alexander in order to get the shot at Christian. So Trey Miguel beat Steve Macklin and Phantasmo to win the title. The Inspiration, which is the former Iconics, beat Decay to win the Knockout Tag Team titles. And in the opener, it was a tournament final intergender 6-way match for the Impact Digital Media title. Jordynne Grace won. So that's the belt that they're going to defend on the social media channels. So I guess it would be kind of like the 24/7 title. So that's Bound for Glory tonight. I've seen it not one moment of the show, unfortunately.
Yeah, I didn't see that one either. Unfortunately, just too much stuff.
Dude, there's too much. I did not see any of the Impact Wrestling Bound for Glory show, at least not yet. I will try to watch it. But the big news coming out of this show was they did a 20-wrestler intergender Call Your Shot Gauntlet match. It was won by Moose. This led to the main event where Josh Alexander was facing Christian Cage for the Impact title, and Josh Alexander beat him with an ankle lock to become the champion. His family hit the ring, they're celebrating, and then Moose's music hit. And he cashed in his call to shot, and he hit Josh Alexander with a spear, and he pinned him in 7 seconds. Moose is your new Impact champion. Huge fan of Moose. Easy feud now with Josh Alexander chasing Moose to win the title back. Alexander getting the rug pulled out from under him. Christian's lost the title. He's gone. Everything made sense. So that was the big story coming out of the show.
Bah.
And tonight, well, we can talk about it after the break, but tonight at the tapings, Josh Alexander will also be rewarded with a match with Minoru Suzuki.
That's awesome.
Back in a moment with more Observer Live.
You guys.
Back in the show, Brian Alvarez here, Wrestling Observer Live. Mike Sempervive, also of WrestlingObserver.com. Listen, maybe the Josh Alexander Moose thing will be a huge bust. Maybe it'll work. I don't know. But you're supposed to be angry that he won the title and it got stolen out from underneath him. That's the whole point of the chase here. So we'll see what happens. You didn't like it, I hear.
No. I don't know if it's really going to make anybody angry or whether it led to...
Well, you should read the chat then.
It seemed like a collective eye roll for on Saturday night. And look, I just think now was the time for Josh Alexander, and I don't know. I assume he's re-signed. I know they were trying to re-sign him. And again, I don't know his contract status. If he's not, then hey, I would go with this move too. You can use him once in a while or whatever. That's cool. But I know they wanted to keep him, and it makes sense to keep him because he's great at what he does. And him holding on to the title for a little bit and having Moose take it in some sort of nefarious way and then doing this chase, I thought would have been a nice way to go, but they got the instant heat with the family out there. Moose gets the win, and I understand you're going to be upset. There's going to be people, too, by the way, that they really like or they dislike Moose, and that's just going to be how that goes. And that's going to be the other thing, was now the time to do that with everything going on with Tessa Blanchard and with how some people look at Moose. It was now the time to do that, especially when you had Alexander right there? I don't know. I guess, the public's going to dictate that. What is cool, though, it does open up Josh Alexander to win the Jim Lynam for AEW, have another match with Fred Yehi, which, again, for Alexander's style and for what was on display this weekend with Bloodsport, I mean, that style of wrestling is, fantastic. So, if he shines there, if he, again, there's a lot of things I'd like to see Josh Alexander do, so we'll see how this goes, but I don't know if it's going to be really anything that helps Impact. It doesn't seem like really anything gets Impact buzzing right now, but we'll see.
All right, we've got Impact. I want to make sure we talk about this, even though I saw 0 minutes of it today.
0. It's so weird in that, like the Rocky Romero Bryan Danielson match, like it felt less special to me on Dynamite because I had just finished watching Rocky Romero versus like Trey Miguel on Impact, and this week you had Rocky Romero against Rohit Raju on Impact, and it's weird when you see the guys going back and forth, and it's a shame that Tony does use those guys, and again, not a shame for them, but I mean a shame for Impact, in that the novelty of these, New Japan guys and New Japan Strong guys being on Impact doesn't seem as special when they're also on the other show. We had Minoru Suzuki on AEW Dynamite, and it's like we're getting Minoru Suzuki now on Impact, and it just doesn't seem as fresh and exciting when they've already been on the other show.
The funny thing is, like, if you're a fan of the so-called Forbidden Door and seeing people from different promotions wrestling, like, it's Impact. Like, yes. Far and above anything else. They have the biggest mix of people from outside the company because of the different places that they work with. That, I mean, I was super excited to see Rocky Romero, Bryan Danielson on Dynamite, just because I got to see Rocky Romero versus Bryan Danielson on Dynamite. But I mean, it's really, I mean, if it seems special to you and you like it, then you should be watching Impact because everybody is on that show.
Yeah, you've got, El Fantasmo, you've got Hikuleo, you've got FinnJuice, you got Rocky Romero. It's like, that's a lot of New Japan people on the show. And you had Minoru Suzuki as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and no spoilers for you, Brian, because you haven't watched it. His match with Caleb was not as good as his match with Jon Moxley.
I find that hard to believe.
Although it was pretty much what it needed to be, in that should surprise no one, Suzuki just killed the mofo and moved on. But I really hope, because he did take the Gotch pile driver, I hope he's not on television, or at least in a wheelchair for a while. But yeah, I like Impact, but I also struggle with Impact, and it's just a shame that they aren't in a bigger venue. Like, a lot of the matches are really, really good. You know, like the opener was FinnJuice with Chris Bay. I've remembered his name this week, which is much better. And LP. And it's like, it's a really good match. But when you see the really hot crowds of Dynamite or the bigger crowds of WWE, there's an energy that's not there when you don't have that big rabid crowd. And the announcing isn't as exciting and energetic, and it's a shame. And again, I don't know how you fix it with Impact, because you can only, draw the fans that you can draw, and you can only run the venues you can afford. But when you have those smaller crowds, it's like they die down quicker, and it really drops some of the energy in the matches. And it's like, there's some really good matches and some really talented people here on the show. And I'm getting to be an even bigger fan of David Finlay Jr. He's really, really good.
He is really good.
Yeah. And to me, and I noticed it a lot in the opener, that the match, the energy that I mentioned sometimes is lacking. It's like it picks up when he's in the ring. And maybe it's more just because he is my taste of a worker, in that, again, he's like his father. There's no messing around. There's no funny business. It's like, I'm in here, I'm getting the job done, I'm kicking ass, I'm winning this match. And it makes you pay attention more. And all his stuff looks really good. I'm a big fan of his, and I hope he stays with Impact for as long as he can, because he's a really big asset to the show, where the Juice of FinnJuice, Juice Robinson, is a little bit more lighthearted as a character, as is LP. He's way too lighthearted as a character for me. I don't get into back rakes in 2021. And there's a point where you can't have, well, again, you're doing the titty twister gimmick, and it's like, I'm like, no, not my cup of tea. But again, if it works for him and the other audience, then so be it. But it's just a little too goofy for my liking. And again, the straight up penis punch is a bit much. But Finlay David Finlay, on the other hand, he's just an all business, real top notch wrestler, and it's like, I really, really like him.
See, the thing with LP is, like, I haven't seen the match on Impact yet, but I've seen many of his matches in New Japan, and there is the I don't want to call it a lazy style, but early on it is a lazy style. Like, the first half of the match is a very lazy style. But in New Japan, there's like an expectation, and so the second half of the match is always like totally different. And the strong match, it was back rakes, double springboard into a back rake, titty twister spot. But like all built to the big spot where he gets the titty twister blocked, and Juice Robinson has a straight punch, but not to the balls, it's to the face. He fucking punched this guy out, and this place went nuts for that spot because it was built up so well. And then they did all their big moves and near falls, and it had the best reaction of almost anything on the show. So I can understand thinking it's like the lazy style, et cetera, and maybe on secondary matches, so to speak, it is. But I do, in general, think LP is pretty great.
Yeah, I think it was more the situation in that this match was the winners get a shot at the Impact World Tag Team Champions. And it just felt like, why are you acting so lighthearted about this? Where it's one thing if there was a situation where, again, he was wrestling Kaleb with a K, where it's like, we know you're winning, and the fact that you're screwing around and having fun, then it would totally work. And it just felt like, with the exception of David Finlay, the others didn't seem as concerned with winning this match as much as showboating and doing their thing. And I think when it is for a World Tag Team title shot, I would like a more serious presentation. So I was a little more off-put on the shenanigans, if you will.
You know what I've been off-put by, but I could be swayed, and I know you like them, the Inspiration.
Yeah, it's funny in that, like, obviously, again, I know Cass a lot. She trained with me. I really like her. But I never liked the Iconics gimmick. It was just too annoyingly goofy for me. But for some reason, in the Impact venue, I like the Inspiration Act. And I think it's because it stands out better in that the Knockouts division has always, I don't want to say always, but predominantly been a more serious division. Impact Wrestling, their Knockouts division isn't just a long list of women who could be in a bikini catalog. So when you have the Inspiration that are very attractive women with their sexy ring entrance and they're acting better than everyone else as heels, I think that dynamic works a lot better. And I find too, and again, maybe it'll change over time, I don't find like their ring entrance when they used to do the promos walking to the ring, it was very, very grating. But with their weird interaction with the Undead Brides and Havoc, and I'm drawing a blank on her name. She was on her podcast, Rosemary. I'm kind of enjoying their reaction to being out of their element, and for some reason, I'm finding it a better balance. And I think they're the woman that does the ring entrance music and the video and stuff. It just feels very big league to me. That it stands out, and it's like I'm really enjoying the couple segments. They haven't been there that long, but I'm finding the Inspiration feels better than the Iconics did. And I think that's key in that with Impact having a lot of people that, were former WWE stars, it's very important to not feel like you're just their time in the big leagues is done and they'll, sort of do the same thing here just on a smaller level, where it feels like they've stepped up a bit coming here and they've changed a little bit. And I think, too, it helps them that they weren't jobbed and mistreated in WWE. They were a goofy, lighthearted act, but they were predominantly featured when used. So I think they come in fresher, and I like their dynamic being such a contrast to much of the other wrestling. Because, Deonna has been I'm a wrestling machine, I'm a wrestler. Mickie James has always had credibility as a really great wrestler. And then you've got the Rosemarys and the Undead Brides and the, why am I blanking on Mercedes Martinez, where it's like, it's not the diva appearance group. And when you bring in the Inspiration that have that look and have that presentation, it stands out more. And I'm hopeful too that, again, to be perfectly honest, I haven't seen a boatload of Billie Kay's wrestling, but it's like Cass is a lot better wrestler than people give her credit for. And I think there was because of the gimmick, they assumed she's a shitty pretty girl, and it's like she's not. She can really work. And again, I'd like to say the same about Billie, but I honestly haven't seen a ton of Billie's work, so I can't fully endorse that. But I think they're fitting in well, and I like the act.
All right, here's what I want to say. I don't disagree with anything that you've said. However, everything you said is part of my problem with this act so far. I was trying to figure out what bothered me when I was watching the show. It was like last week or the week prior. They did like an interview segment. And, it was they were good at it, whatever. But the thing that bothers me, Lance, is they're champions, okay? And the reason it bothers me is because when I watch them thus far and I see the act, that's like the key to this, the act. To me, it's like they're very good at doing what is an act, okay? And I guess the best analogy I could make is, imagine if all of a sudden Miz's contract expired, okay? Miz is not a horrible wrestler, but he's not a great wrestler. If Miz's contract expired and Tony Khan was like, this guy's been on Dancing with the Stars, he's a big star, whatever, they bring him in, and his first ever match, he won the TNT title. And then he's out there every week, not wrestling, mind you. He's out there, and he's got his suit on, and he's got his glasses, and he's doing his big time, however he does his promos or whatever. It would not work for me. Because what it comes across as is the only reason you're the champion is because you came from the other place and now you're here and we gave you the title. But I hate to use the term, but you don't deserve the title right now. Danielson comes in, he goes 30 minutes with Kenny, draw, great match, but he didn't win the title. Adam Cole comes in, huge star, goes nuts. He didn't win the title. The first thing they did with the Iconics was put the tag team titles on them. And then I have never seen them in the ring. They're talking, they're doing entrances, they're doing backstage interviews, they're doing all of this. And what they're not doing is actually wrestling. So it feels like a championship that was given to them for being stars in another company. If you did not put the titles on them, I would be fine with everything. But I think putting the belts on them was a mistake.
Well, I think it's different because you're talking about a singles championship in AEW that has some of the greatest workers in the world in it, where off the top of your head, can you name 2 top-notch women's tag teams in Impact that are a formed tag team that are real top-notch? I don't think it's the same thing. And I think some of the heat to the gimmick is that they won the titles. And I think, again, it's the old school thing of, having babyfaces chase them because they are annoying and think they're better than each other. I think there's something there where if you had, I'm trying to think, if you had 3 or 4 or 4 or 6 of the greatest women's wrestlers of all time in that tag team division as long-standing tag team, then yeah, you might get they don't deserve the tag titles, but it's like Mickie James is the current Knockouts women's champion, and it's like they didn't come in and beat Mickie James for the Knockouts title. They came in and beat, and I'm not even sure, who did they beat? They beat it at Bound for Glory. Who were the team? Do you know, Brian?
I can find it.
Well, the fact that you don't know...
it was quite forgettable.
But it supports my argument in that if you don't even know who the other champions were, then the inspiration taking the titles off them isn't this big travesty of injustice, because the previous champions weren't...
It was Decay.
Decay? Okay, so that's Rosemary and Havoc. And... So again, when they're not coming in and dethroning, the Briscoes, the Midnight Express, this tag team that is established as just being the greatest tag team in ring of all time, I think having a team that you view as more an act than team is perfectly fine. And so I think it works. And then again, we're having the rematch. I think a turning point is because they did a match, and I think Havoc and Rosemary are coming back at them at the next pay-per-view. So we will see. All right. We got a couple minutes left here. Anything else from the Impact show? Yeah, just an interesting thing. And they did a 3-way in the main event. There's a lot of, you win this match to get a title shot on these shows. But it was Morrissey, Eddie Edwards, and Matt Cardona. Winner gets a shot at Moose. And I just thought it was really weird in that it was the dreaded 2 baby faces and 1 heel in a 3-way. And they did... Basically, they told the story that Morrissey's the monster and these other 2 guys had to team up to work over him. And it's like, it was turning Morrissey babyface. Which, as I'm watching, I'm like, okay, this is really smart, because when he wins, he's going against Moose, so we need him to be a babyface. He and Moose have been buddies, but there's tension. I'm like... Oh, this is a really good way to position Morrissey as a babyface, because he's dominating these other 2 babyfaces and the crowd is chanting for him. But then Eddie Edwards won. And I'm like, oops, that backfired, because it sounded like the crowd was hoping Morrissey would win, and then a established babyface won, and it almost felt like a little bit of a letdown now that we get Eddie versus Moose instead of Morrissey. But again, maybe they're holding Morrissey off for the actual full-blown pay-per-view, where I think Turning Point is not as big as whichever the next pay-per-view is coming. But it was just interesting that traditionally I hate the 2 baby faces versus the 1 heel, and then it was working to turn the heel baby face on the other 2 baby faces, and then he's staying a heel. So it was odd, but a pretty decently solid match, though.
What about Impact? Let's talk about the best thing on the show, Lance.
Fulton in the fridge?
Oh, my God. This was the fucking greatest. They're doing this segment backstage, and it was really funny because, like, it was Fulton and Sabin and Ace Austin, okay? So they're just doing this promo or whatever. And Sabin and Ace Austin, they start getting into this fight. And they get in the fight, and Madman Fulton, literally, he just walks up and he pushes Sabin to the side, and Sabin smashes into this fridge and he goes down. And I thought, what a fucking geek. Like, you couldn't have made Sabin look like a bigger geek. The guy just like went like this and he runs into the fridge and he's dead. So here I'm thinking, this is what a load of shit this is. Poor Chris Sabin. And so all of a sudden, you know, Sabin kind of stumbles to his feet. He's in front of this fridge he got shoved into. And all of a sudden, you see Fulton just running ahead of steam towards Sabin. And Sabin calmly opens a door. Fulton runs into the fridge. He shuts the door, and it locks. I fucking cried watching that.
Yeah,
and
it's
Fulton's
a big
banging on the door. It was right out of a fucking cartoon.
It's
never saw it coming.
Fridge. It's an industrial fridge.
It was like a meat locker or something like that. But you totally didn't see it coming. It was perfect fucking visual comedy. It was great.
And even before that, I thought whoever choreographed the fight was good. In that, like, Sabin drops Ace Austin right away, and Fulton grabs him by the throat. And Fulton's a big mofo, if you don't know. And there's the fridge there, and Sabin just sort of, like, grabs the arms that are around his throat and, like, steps back and pulls Fulton shoulder/face first into the corner of the fridge to break free. So he can go back on Ace Austin, but then Big Man does the bear paw spot and throws him against the big stainless steel industrial fridge. And like you say, it's like, I legit didn't see it coming. Like, I thought, okay, he'll move and the big guy will run into the fridge and go bonk. But when he opened the door and the fucker just disappeared and he closed it, it's got the legit lock handles on it. I was just like, oh my God, that was like so great. And then Sabin did like the knock on the fridge and walked away. I'm like, that was tremendous. Fulton in the fridge.
Yes, I was kind of dreading this show just because, oh God, another fucking show to watch. But I mean, it's a pretty easy to watch show. And I still can't get, I mean, my biggest criticism, God bless the guy, I'm sure he's a nice guy. I know you know where I'm going. Matt fucking Stryker, okay? Bro, it's okay to just not say anything. I think that's the thing that irritates me. That is when he'll do poetry. Like, there was something in the Iconics match. The match ends, or the inspiration, and he said something like, "When you hear that song in your heart," or some shit. And he just goes on. I'm like, what in the fuck are you talking about? And then in the main event, it's like Suzuki's going for some running spot on the ramp. And, you know, he's 50-something fucking years old. And he has a couple of stutter steps, and it's not perfect. And it's like, just fucking ignore it. Instead, he has to start going off on, did you see the stutter steps that Suzuki took right there? He took those stutter steps to change his trajectory to make the blow even more devastating. I was like, what in the fuck are you talking about? Like, no, anybody who runs to do a kick is trying to fucking get their steps right. You don't have to point out that the poor guy did a fucking stutter step to do it. It's just like, dude, just call the match. Give a little bit of insight. You were a fucking wrestler, dude. Just give some insight about wrestling. Don't point out people's weaknesses and then try to change it into like some positive. Just don't mention their weaknesses. Cut out the fucking poetry. It just fucking drives me crazy. Am I the only one?
No, he made Suzuki's footwork like the story of the match. Because even after, I don't know if it was before or after the kick on the ramp, Suzuki charged like the elbow in the corner or something. And he was a bit off on the distance, and he ended up taking a couple smaller steps as he got in. And it's probably because the New Japan ring's bigger than the Impact ring. And he was just a little bit, a half a step off where he needed to be. And it became the narrative of, did you see that little stutter step there? He's got this extra hop step. And I'm just like, can we just not talk about little things like that? But yeah, you're right. Although kudos to Suzuki for being an absolute pro in that he put Josh Alexander over as clean and strong as humanly possible.
Bro, not only that, but he got dropped on his fucking head. That finish.
He didn't touch.
Oh, I mean, Josh Alexander is awesome, but that looked scary.
It looked great, but I don't think he touched.
I sure hope not. If he did, he's dead. I mean, I can tell you that much. I mean, this was full upside down, and he tucked his head like he tried to, Lenny Poffo it. And
I don't think I'd take that move, to be honest. Like, again, Josh Alexander's a great worker, but I do not like moves where I have zero say in the control of whether I'm going to land on my head or not.
That is exactly what this
and that one is that one's a scary looking one. But yeah, they Suzuki put him over like $1 billion. So kudos to him. You mentioned the inspiration match, and just again, there's the little things on the show that confuse me at times. The inspiration are heels. Decay are baby faces, correct?
That's what I've gotten out of this show from watching it, yes.
And, the Inspiration had their match. They won. And then 4 members of Decay, 2 of which are men, came out and surrounded them in the dark, and the Inspiration was scared. And I'm like, they're being menaced by 4 people.
They're being bullied in the fucking dark. They can't get away. It's just like the fucking Fiend and Seth Rollins. I was like, what is this?
But why are the baby faces taking advantage of a 4-on-2? Like, I don't understand why the babyface women needed 2 men as additional backup. It's like, I felt sorry for the Inspiration.
Well, I do believe, Lance, that there is a theory among some, but not all bookers, that if a heel team does something dastardly to a babyface team, then you can do 4-on-2, 5-on-2, whatever, and the fans are going to accept it because the heels deserve it for what they did. I would presume that was what the thought process was here. The Iconics, cheating to win the titles or whatever, they deserve to be bullied by these 4 blokes.
Well, two blokes and 2 blokettes.
That's true. Birds, I was told.
Birds is the official.
That's what I was told.
All right. The other thing I want to point out that I thought was fantastic, and I assume he's the one behind him because his stuff's always been great there. The Violent by Design promo / video packages and stuff, I think they're really, really awesome. Just the dark, sinister feel to the way they're shot. And it doesn't
promos by Eric Young.
Yeah, it doesn't hurt that his voice sounds like he's, been gargling with broken glass for like 20 years.
But you know what else it is? It's his delivery.
Oh,
because he has a way of being very, very... He doesn't yell and scream, but he will yell and scream at the right moment in his promo. I just watched that promo. I thought, this fucking guy. I mean, I'm sure many people did, but I saw him at an indie show here in like fucking 2002, and he was the best guy on the entire show. And I've seen him throughout his entire career, and there's one place where they didn't do jack shit with Eric Young, and it was WWE. And I was always like, do you guys fucking know who you hired here? He's so good, but he was just some bloke.
And the funny thing is with missing the boat on Eric Young is that he can do anything.
Yes.
Like he was entertaining. It's not my cup of tea, but he was entertaining and over as like Super Eric and all the comedy bullshit. Like, he can do anything. He can be serious and credible and creepy and angry. He can be lighthearted and comedic. He can be a babyface. He can be a heel. So it's like, even if you don't get Violent by Design Eric Young, it's like, throw a dart at a dartboard of gimmicks. It's like, he can pull them all off. He can do, and he's a really good worker on top of that. But
yes,
yeah, his raspy, horrible voice just also adds, and I think that it really helps him not have to yell and still feel like a sinister, dark promo. The Violent by Design stuff was really, really strong on this show.
Anything else from the show?
One other little thing that it's a critique, but I didn't like, or just, they did and again, it was from BTI, which is what, before the Impact, or I'm assuming it's their digital pre-show. It's sort of like their version of the bump. I know it exists, but I don't fully understand what it is. They showed the Bryan Myers concertoing his lackey. I don't remember the lackey's name, but his former student. And, they had Ross Foreman, who apparently has now got his medical degree and was evaluating the guy backstage. But doing the violent injury angle minutes before the Moose Eddie Edwards brawl, I thought took away from it. And just that, okay, we saw one guy get laid out by Bryan Myers. Now we're seeing Moose lay out Eddie, although then it turns out that he didn't end up laying out Eddie, which, again, I wasn't as much of a fan of because I thought Eddie took too much to just bounce back and come back and start beating up Moose again. But I liked, if they didn't have the Bryan Myers thing and had we laid somebody out and killed him angle, I would have been more into the Moose Eddie Kingston attempting to do the same thing. But there was a lot of good things. And the other, which again, the return of Wrestle House 2 is going to be probably the bane of your and I existence, Brian.
What in the fuck was that at the end of this show? They finished that. I watched Minoru Suzuki and Josh Alexander. And I saw Josh Alexander drop this poor old fucker on his head with that sit-down double underhook pile driver. And I go from that to, what? What is this?
Were you watching for the original Wrestle House?
No.
Oh, my God. You're in for either a treat or a brain aneurysm, depending on which comes first.
So I need to go back and find the other one?
No, don't. And I think
I might like it.
I don't know.
I like talking Shopomania. I mean, I just want to be entertained at the end of the day.
Well, maybe you would like it, because I think that was the primary goal of Wrestle House, but I just... A goofy, wacky reality television show of Wrestle House with Tommy Dreamer as the voice of reason was a little too much for me. So I'm
God,
not...
What are they going to do with this one?
I do not know.
Is Dreamer going to be utilized again? I haven't seen him really anywhere since...
He's doing indies, and he's back on Busted Open Radio. So
he is back on Busted Open? Okay.
Yep. So he seems to have resurfaced, but I don't know if he'll be at... Because, again, Turning Point is this Saturday. So Turning Point Saturday, Survivor Series Sunday, so it's going to be a busy weekend. But, yeah, and they'll be taping, I assume, Wrestle House after the Turning Point show, so... We will see, but it should surprise no one. I'm generally not a fan of the more reality show segments of a wrestling show, shall we say.
Impact pay-per-view.
Yeah, they had Turning Point show, and I guess the big match was Eddie Edwards and Moose in a Full Metal Mayhem match. And W Morrissey interfered and helped Moose retain the championship. So they're keeping those two guys kind of... I've got to figure that they at some point turn them on each other and do the singles feud, but that hasn't happened yet. And I think Trey Miguel retained the X title in a 3-over, Laredo Kid and Steve Macklin. And... Inspiration beat Decay, Rosemary and Havoc, and what other stuff was on that show? Those were Mickie James beat Mercedes Martinez, and they're going to do on the next pay-per-view is the Hard to Kill, which will be in January, and that will be Mickie James rematch with Deonna Purrazzo. And I think that's the main stuff from that show. Gallows and Anderson beat Hikuleo and Chris Bay to keep the tag team titles. That was also on the show.
All right, we got a lot to get into here today. Should we just start with this Impact House gimmick?
If you would like to start with Wrestle House and finish with AEW, that's fine.
Well, let's put it this way, Lance. So yesterday, or last week actually, I watched Impact, and it ended with that thing, and I was like, what the fuck was this? And you said, you never saw the first Wrestle House. And I said, no. And you said, oh, well, it was something else. So it put it out of my mind. And so yesterday was Thanksgiving, and I didn't watch any wrestling. I just enjoyed my Thanksgiving. And then today, I knew we were doing this show, and so I knew that I had to watch Impact. And you started sending me texts. And the first one was, I think it's Wrestle House this week. I said, what? And long story short, the Impact show this week is Wrestle House 2. Now, you may be asking, dear listener, what in the fuck is a Wrestle House? Well, I am here to tell you I don't have any fucking idea, okay? Lance watched the entire thing.
All 2 hours.
I started watching it, and 10 minutes in, I was painfully regretting my decision. And I almost was like, fuck it, Lance could talk about this show. But I was on the treadmill, and yesterday was Thanksgiving, and I'm fat as fuck, and so I thought, you know what, I'm going to keep going. I'll see
for all 10 minutes of your cardio?
I'll see how much I can get through here. So I kept going. And I got about, I think I told you 30 minutes, but I think I got about halfway through. I got about 45 minutes in. And then, you know, I had more important things to do. But let's put it this way. My thoughts on this, and you can go over all the details, but just in general here, my thoughts are, if you can make it through the first 10 minutes, it gets better, okay? The first 10 minutes, I was hating it. Once we got a little further in, and once Willie Mack showed up, who was the star of Wrestle House, then I was kind of enjoying it. And, you know, when it came time that I had to go do more important things, I did kind of think, I'm going to come back and watch the end of this. So, I don't really know. Some of you are going to absolutely hate it. Some of you are going to love it. I'm a guy who likes some wackiness and some campiness in wrestling. But I do have a limit, and 90 minutes without commercials, because if you take commercials out, it's an hour and 26 minutes of Wrestle House. It's probably a little bit too much for me. But part of the problem for me was it opens up with a recap of Wrestle House 1, and somehow when the recap was over, I was even more confused, and I knew nothing going in. So that's pretty impressive. So I was like fucking out to lunch. I had no idea what was going on. If you watch enough of it, you find out that the story is that Swinger is depressed. He doesn't like Thanksgiving. And
they also shut down Swinger's Palace, which was an ongoing storyline with Impact.
Fuck, that's over my head, Lance. Like, all I got out of this one was Swinger doesn't like Thanksgiving. Everybody is stuck into the house until he can learn to appreciate Thanksgiving. And it's a bunch of wacky things where they try to come up with some idea where he's going to end up liking Thanksgiving. I haven't got to the end. I presume it ends with him liking Thanksgiving because they got to get out of this fucking house to do TV. But there were highs and lows. There was stuff about it I liked, and there was stuff about it that I was just flabbergasted by.
I thought the slow-mo sexy Sabin was hilarious.
It was, Lance, but the problem with that is the babysitters were over. And my kids were all nutty, and they were upstairs.
Thought you were watching porn.
Well, no, I don't like the kids to come upstairs. I want them to stay downstairs. But they were upstairs, and I'm watching this, and fucking every time they played that fucking music, and Sabin's walking out of the shower all covered in sweat and all sultry, I'm like, oh, Christ. So they didn't walk in, thankfully, but I was petrified of that.
Yeah, see, I was watching Impact back with the original Wrestle House, and it was a lot different, actually. Still campy, but it was a segment every week on the show, and I hated it because I found it impossible to take the campiness of Wrestle House on my serious wrestling show, and I thought each made the other worse because it's like, okay, the one makes me think this is all a joke, and then the other I'm supposed to care about. And I don't recall the other one. Like, I thought the other one was more of a legit Big Brother, just we're going to put some wrestlers in a house and, you know, shenanigans ensue, where this was a complete self-contained holiday special, which is sort of like if if Seinfeld wanted to do Seinfeld's probably not a good example because it's a comedy, but if, SWAT just decided to do a Christmas special that was kind of funny and completely out of character and goofy, it's like, okay, it's a holiday special. And that's where I didn't mind this one, and at times enjoyed it, in that there was a theme throughout the whole show. Swinger is sad, depressed, not thankful, and they're going to try to improve his mood. And the DK people transport people to Wrestle House, where they're locked in this alternate universe, if you will, of Wrestle House, and the mission is to, make Swinger happy. So yeah, campy and goofy, but I liked the fact that it's Thanksgiving. Be honest, probably half the people that watch the show normally aren't even watching. It's Thanksgiving. So it's like, it's a standalone goofy show. If in the first 5 minutes you like it, stay watching. If not, tune in next week for, back to our serious wrestling show. And then there was enough funny stuff that I liked it for the most part. Like, again, it's not like I'd watch this as a weekly show, and 2 hours was a lot. But I laughed at Willie Mack. I laughed at Chris Sabin. I thought they were really good. And it was a nice tying up of a lot of characters and other stupid stories that paid off enough for me. And then the other thing that I thought it did accomplish, which I don't think you're even aware of, but they're coming up on their retro throwback show. They did it last year, where they basically did the show as if it was the 80s, and they made fun of old 80s wrestling or old territory wrestling. And that was that one match with Ethan Page, and
yes,
that was from the other show. And I've got photos that Don Callis sent me when he was there, because he did everybody's in their mullets with their spandex and their fringe and stuff, because it's, Throwback Throwdown or whatever they called it. And they're doing another one of those. And I thought this sort of set the stage for that coming up a little bit with a reminder of what happened previous. So on the whole, yes, a completely campy, silly, dumb show, but I enjoyed it as a holiday special standalone. And if they did this, once a year when there's a show that they know most of their audience isn't watching anyway, because it's a silly, it's Thanksgiving. I can't imagine a whole lot of people are sitting down to watch their regular Impact show. So if you haven't seen it, watch until Willie Mack shows up. If you're not hooked by the time Willie Mack shows up, then you're not going to like it. If Willie Mack hooks you at that point in time, then enjoy yourself for an hour and a half. Just don't take it or yourself very seriously.
There was a storyline where, Swinger's all depressed, and so they come up with this idea that he was a big fan of forget the name they used for Willie Mack, but the story was that Willie Mack was an old territorial guy that used to work with Swinger. And so if they could just get Willie Mack to the house, like Swinger would be so happy to see his old friend that they could all leave the house, because he has to be happy to leave. Bear with me. So they show up with Willie Mack, but it turns out that Willie Mack and Swinger hate each other. And so they're all, blah, blah, blah. And so they end up doing a match. And I'm watching the match, and they had this spot at the end, and I think that Swinger hit him with a gimmick or something like that, and he goes for the cover. And I thought, if he fucking pins Willie Mack, it's going to totally fuck up the storyline. Because then, he should be happy, but there's still an hour left of the show. So Willie Mack kicks out. It was actually a good near fall. And then Willie Mack gets the pin, and of course now, he's Swinger's still all depressed. So I don't know where it goes, but if I explained that story and you were like, man, this sounds like something I could sink my teeth into, well, Wrestle House is for you. Otherwise, don't watch it.
But yeah, Willie done up with the gray hair and the cane to look like he was such a great old guy wrestler.
He was awesome.
He was fantastic. There's not a full-blown wedding, but there's a romance involved. There's all kinds of stuff and I think too, it's like the Swinger character, you're either going to love or you're going to hate. And we've talked about it before on the show, where I don't even know how many modern fans will get all of the Swinger old indie guy wrestling references.
Well, Lance, given the age skew of all of these wrestling shows, I think pretty much all of them understand Swinger.
Well, the thing is, if you were in the business, yes, but I don't know if even wrestling fans understand a lot of the stuff. Maybe they do. Maybe there's been enough of a sheet reading generation that everybody knows the inside lingo and stories. But as a standalone, it was funny. If it was a weekly show, I don't think I would last very long.
Well, I did I did laugh at my child just peed all over the couch.
Oh, nice.
Anyway, this is potty training. We started
it's
early.
Going well.
Yeah. What was I going to say? Oh, yeah. I did like watching the swinger match with Willie Mack because they wrestled it like a throwback match. And, like, you certainly couldn't call it a good match, but, like, if you like that old, shitty, territorial bullshit style, you know, the guy gets hit and he holds his ear or whatever. I was fucking dying watching this match.
Bob Brown used to do that. You could stomp on his foot and he'd grab his ear.
Yeah.
That was his selling position, no matter what.
Buddy did the exact same thing. It's like you hit him in the stomach, and you know, he grabbed the stomach, and then you chop him and he does the grab the ear thing. I was like, why the fuck are you grabbing your ear? But he did. So I like watching that stuff. I made it all the way to the main event of Impact. I didn't watch the main event, but I watched more than usual. Yeah.
You missed the low light of the show. And that's not a shot at the main event. It's actually something that happened. It happened after the main event, not in the main event.
Well, what happened? Let's talk about Impact here first, because I got a lot I got to say about this show. This is a weird show.
And again, spoiler alert if you haven't seen it, but the close of the show, Matt Cardona ends up standing tall, holding the belt over his head, which is a good thing to do. You're building to a title match at the pay-per-view. He's the babyface in the match. So doing that is great. And then your friend, your favorite commentator of all time, Matt Stryker, compares him, he didn't mention him by name, but talked about having dumbbells and being on a trampoline and always being ready, and compared him to Dennis Stamp.
Bro, I don't know about what to do about this Matt Stryker guy. Like, I just don't know what to do with the guy. Because when you think about it, and he was good once for a short period of time, then he became a gimmick. But, you know, I'm not a fan of his commentary. I don't wish ill on the guy. I don't wish that he would be fired or anything like that, lose his job or anything like that. And to his credit, what I would say about him is that he loves pro wrestling. He's a very, very passionate pro wrestling fan. He clearly loves it. But, bro, I mean, just because you know all about Dennis Stamp and always being ready and the trampolines and why would you bring that up? What does that have to do with anything? That's a negative, not a positive. Dennis Stamp was ridiculed for bouncing on the trampoline with weights and always being ready. He was ridiculed for that. It was not a situation where people went, oh, man, I aspire to be like Dennis Stamp someday, always ready. Did you know he trains with weights? No one said that. They were like, look at this idiot. He's jumping on a trampoline with weights. What a dummy. Why would you compare somebody who's going for the world championship to Dennis Stamp?
Well, I wouldn't, but I can see there is a comparison in that Dennis Stamp was he's always waiting for the call, so he's staying ready. So there is a similar story.
So say the guy's always ready. He's always waiting for the call.
Well, again, Cardona's whole gimmick is always ready. But yeah, it's a case of it's an obscure reference that half your audience isn't going to get. Actually, probably more than half. But those who get it, it's even worse. Because like you point out, Dennis Stamp was the butt of jokes for years after that appearance as the crazy guy that was bouncing on a trampoline.
So I don't got a lot to say about the show. I mean, there were things on it that I liked, things on it that I didn't like. There's a lot of intergender on this show.
Yes.
And that's the main talking point for me. First, we had Deonna Purrazzo and Matthew he needs a new
Rehwoldt.
name. He needs a new name.
Yes.
He had another name for like a week on the Indies, which was like 50 times better, but then he went back to this. But Matthew R., as I'll call him, because I am my grandmother's grandchild, they faced Mickie James and Chris Sabin, and I was fine with this match. Like, I'm not a huge intergender fan normally, but they try to work the matches smart. They don't have the dudes just beating on the women like domestic violence. It's spots. You know, they allow the women to shine and everything like that. But then later on in the show, it was just...
It's bizarre.
It wasn't even that I didn't like it. It was just, this was ridiculous. Okay, I can understand when you do like, okay, we've got Deonna Purrazzo is going to face Eric Young or whoever, okay? She's a strong woman. He's short. They can do their spots together and whatever, okay? I understand when you've got one big dude and one small woman against another big dude and another small woman. They had a match on this show. I am not making this fucking match up. I can't even believe I'm saying this right now. It was the Inspiration and the Influence, which would be the former Iconics, Cassie Lee and Jessie McKay, and Tenille Dashwood and Madison Rayne. That's one team, okay?
Four small women.
Cassie, Jessie, Tenille, and Madison. That's one team. On the other team was Rosemary, Havoc, Crazy Steve, and Black Taurus, who's fucking 15 feet fucking tall and 500 pounds. 2 huge men and 2 women against 4 small women.
Yes.
What in the fuck was this match? And Tenille's tagging in against the Bull. It's like
how big is that dude? Is he like 240,
He's
250?
fucking giant. Well, I mean, he's in there with small women,
tall,
so he may not be as big as he looks. But in this fucking match, he looked like the size of Andre the Giant. Like, it doesn't matter what size he really is. In this match, he looked like Andre the Giant. Him, Crazy Steve, and 2 women against 4 tiny women. And Tenille's in there trying to punch Black Taurus. I'm like, what in the fuck is this match? And it wasn't even like a horrible match where, like, you know, they were, you know, Penta and whatever. That Lucha Underground match was just horrible violence. But it was fucking ridiculous. Like, in no universe would anybody in their right mind put this match together. But they did.
Yeah, I think, like, even the opener with the intergender stuff, it's like, you either ignore that they're women and men and they just beat the living shit out of each other, which I'm not a fan of, or like you say, you know, you carefully construct your spots and you make it okay, but it's like those matches feel faker to me. Like Mickie James and Deonna Purrazzo have a heated issue, but when you're careful to construct your spots, it feels less real to me. And again, this match was just completely absurd, the visuals in it. And it starts feeling more fake to me. And then when you add that to the show, and I'll just jump around a little bit, to the FinnJuice match where, you know, they're working against the Learning Tree guys and they're doing the magician pulling the streamer out of the guy's mouth. And I'm like, okay, this is a lighthearted, goofy, joking around match. And it just started feeling like the whole show was goofy joking around because it was impossible to take serious this gigantic bull in there doing spots with, you know, Billy Kay or Jessie McKay, I guess now. And it's just, it was very, very absurd and jarring. And then obviously the contrast when you then throw to, which are still, in my opinion, the highlight of the show, the Violent by Design video package promos that are just incredible, serious, dark, deep stuff. It's so weird. And like the finish just came out of nowhere in the 8-person intergender. And it was just so bizarre. Very wacky.
Anything else on that show you want to go over?
Just one thing as a props to him, Morrissey, W Morrissey, because this is something I've discussed it with somebody else. With when you bring in, for lack of a more complimentary term, WWE cast-offs, you know, guys that were formerly from WWE, and you know, we talk about it a lot with AEW. It's like, to me, the big thing is you don't want them to come in and, in my opinion, feel like they're the same guy that you used to see in WWE, especially if they're underneath guys. And it's like, when I watch W Morrissey, I do not see or think Big Cass ever. Like, he feels like a completely different person to me. Now, obviously, they look very similar, but he was, you know, the wacky guy with the SWST soft, and it's like, He's got a different gear. He carries himself differently. He works completely serious and straight up. And I think that's really great in that it feels like any baggage, for lack of a different term, that he has from WWE, it's like he put it away and came in as a new guy, and he's just being a value as himself. And his, big running boots, I assume are like, they look awesome. And I assume they're really safe because Cardona just fed his face and forehead to the guy on numerous occasions and got booted right in the head. So I think his work and his character personality is a big step up of what he was doing in WWE, and I like that.
Well, let's talk about Impact.
Did you watch it?
Yeah, I did. I didn't see the contract signing, but I saw everything up until then.
Ah, well, you missed the
But what's the video?
There was a coming soon video vignette thing that it was funny. I think I just had a complete brain fart, but it's it felt very Russian, and I'm thinking, oh, they've, finally going to do something with Miro again. And then I realized it's I'm not watching AEW. They're not doing something with Miro. And I was just curious your take, because I was left thinking Lana, which I thought would be a weird...
I'm wondering if I somehow totally missed this whole video. I don't remember this.
Yeah, I saw it.
Huh. I mean, I guess Lana could be going to Impact, but I figured if she went anywhere, she'd go to AEW. Maybe they decided... But you can't decide you can't afford her, because Impact's going to afford her and AEW can?
Well, you could decide that perhaps you don't want her with Miro, in which case having her do something else would be odd. So if she was a valet presence in Impact, that might be cool. Who knows? Again, I could have also read it 1,000% wrong, because it's not like in any way, shape, or form did they say it was her. It was just when it started, my first thought was Miro. And then when I realized I was watching Impact, and then at the very end, there was the back of someone's head. It may have just been a silhouette, but it's felt like it was a woman. So that my brain went to Lana, and I could be 2,000% off.
Well, you are 2,000% off sometimes, Lance. This would just be another time.
Oh, yes.
But I think we would agree that it was a pretty good wrestling show. That Chris Bay match was awesome.
Yep, there was some good wrestling on that show for sure. But I think the important thing, unfortunately, you didn't watch, because it's what I want to discuss, was the contract signing. They did what I thought was a really excellent angle at the end of the show with Moose, Cardona, and Chelsea. But, and this is something we've discussed before, I think this angle meant significantly less because they do the intergender stuff.
Well, tell everybody what the angle was first.
Again, Morrissey signed and left, so he's not part of this. And they got into back and forth of words. It got into an altercation, and Moose, put Cardona through a table. And, Chelsea got in the way, and he just dismissively shoved her away. She takes the bump on her ass. He just, like Godzilla, just back palms her away. Which, again, even that, to me, would mean more if we didn't see guys hitting women with finishers. And, we talked about it before, where they tried to make, Rohit Raju this evil, horrible person because he hit Chelsea with a jumping knee strike when it's a legal move in a wrestling match that they were having. So, anyway, he sets up the chair around Cardona's neck, and he grabs another chair to hit Cardona, concerto style, half concerto, half Pillmanize Cardona's neck. And Chelsea grabs the chair and stops him. And there's that bit of a back and forth delay. And then finally Moose just pulls the chair away from her, turns. And here comes Cardona with the big chair shot. Moose ducks, and Cardona hits his fiancée in the head with the chair and KOs her. And Moose shoving her down and physically shoving Chelsea on her ass is good heat. Cardona accidentally KOing his wife as a result of what Moose was doing would be great, but I just feel that it loses some of the heat when we see Black Taurus and Crazy Steve beating up women last week. And seeing this type of man-on-woman violence regularly on the show takes some of the significance away from this. And again, I thought the angle was done very well. And I just feel that if they didn't have the man-on-woman violence all the time, as if it didn't matter, it's just, yeah, we have a match, and sometimes guys work with girls, and sometimes girls work with guys, and guys punch girls in the face all the time, this would have meant so much more. And as a main event angle for this championship, I thought it was great, and I thought it would have meant so much more if we didn't see guys and women fighting and hitting each other with moves on a regular basis.
Well, I'd like to talk about it, Lance, but I didn't see it.
But do you agree with the premise?
Well, yeah. I mean, one of the things is if you watch, and we talked about before, the intergender matches. I'm never weirded out by the intergender matches, because the intergender matches are never really based upon violence. They're based upon athleticism. They do spots, and every now and then there'll be a strike or whatever, but mostly it's spots, and the women hold their own with the men. So, this, strong violence is very much against what they normally do. So, I mean, maybe because they don't do strong violence in their normal intergender, it'll get over, bigger, because it is different from what they do. But I think obviously, especially in the case of WWE, they don't even let men and women lock up. A man beating up a woman to get heat in an angle would be a far, far bigger deal there than it probably would be an Impact, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think too, and it's just because I've mentioned this before, and it's the logic that at times I find is missing in intergender, in that a lot of times they just present each person as equal, even if one is smaller than the other. And it's like I've seen guys, take suplexes from women that are, 80 pounds smaller than them, and I think it's like, would you let a dude that was 80 pounds smaller than you do that? And I think that's where, again, because Moose is such a big, powerful presence. He's a big dude. And I think him shoving Chelsea down is a horrible visual, which is actually a great visual, because that's what you want. You want to be appalled at this. But we did just see Black Taurus, in there wrestling with women last week. So I just think, unfortunately, the one damaged the other. But on the whole, it was a really good angle. And I'll be curious where they follow up with it. But it was a good way to get some serious heat on Moose heading into Hard to Kill in January.
All right, Throwback Throwdown is coming.
I love when these stars align, just the absurdity of, for those who may not have heard it, on Observer Live yesterday, day before, very, very recently, Bryan was talking about NXT 2.0 and how it's, bringing back so much stuff from the 80s. And he's like, we need mullets. And it's like, we need, women aerobics instructors. And he's listing all the crazy, wacky things from the 80s. And I'm texting him while listening to Observer Live, adding to his list. And then watching Impact, and they cut to Throwback Throwdown, which is on Saturday on Impact Plus or their premium YouTube subscription thingy. And it's their half a spoof making fun of, in light of, and just having fun with the absurdities of the 80s and the old territory days and stuff. And in the video package, they actually had girls in the aerobics gear that you would see in the 80s doing aerobics. And it was just like, oh my God, this is exactly what Bryan was talking about.
We'll have to watch and find out if it's better or worse than NXT 2.0. And one of them is a spoof, and one of them's not supposed to be.
Yeah, and barring anything coming up, I think I have the weekend free. I'm going to live tweet this show like I did their last one. So I will. I'm going to watch. I saw a lot of last year's in clips because Don Callis was still there, and he was, when they taped it, he was sending me photographs of all of the crazy outfits and get-ups and stuff they were doing for the show. And I think the thing that I get a kick out of the most is because everyone else is playing sort of alternative, 80s-ish, territory-ish characters. And Swinger's just the same Swinger we see on current Impact, because his whole deal is that's who he is. And Swinger is just the epitome of that era of wrestling. So it will be no doubt a fun show, if probably extremely absurd.